What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Fast Life Podcast. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Hope you guys are starting off to a great week. You know, getting some shit done, getting some things figured out, and I guess it's time to get ready for the holidays, man. It's hard to believe it's already November. This year is kind of like just gone by, and it's just, man, like it's just unexpected sometimes. But anyway. Had a good weekend. We went down to the Lone Star Rally down in Galveston and caught up with a lot of friends and homies down there, and I got the couch pass from the homies in East Texas. They came down and just was cool, man. It was fun hanging out with them. It was fun just spending the weekend with those guys and listening to all their crazy stories and whatnot. So another great thing about like social media is the people you meet and hang out with. The next thing you know, you're fucking like just partying with them and riding and having good times and making memories and shit. So not to get all hallmarky on you, but that was pretty cool of those guys to let me crash with them and bum it up with them and drink lots of beer and have a good time. So it was also a good time to catch up with some of the just people, man. Got to see my boy Chris Moose and I met Chris Callan from Cyclosource Magazine, who we actually got to do a podcast with, a real strange one. You'll find out more about that one on the next podcast after this. And it was a good time, man. Just catching up with everybody. Got to hang out with Dave Perowitz and Jody Perowitz down at the Perowitz Custom Paint Show and judge a couple bikes, I guess you'd say. But yeah, it was a good time, and hope you had a great weekend. But anyway, got a new sponsor, man. I'm pretty excited about this. So bear with me. I hope I don't choke this one up like I did the first time I was doing the other new sponsors. But you guys heard of Rusty at D&D, right? Well, he came aboard and decided to become a sponsor for our podcast. So the great thing about that is that you can go back and listen to the D&D podcast and find out so much stuff about Rusty and D&D as a company. And the good thing about this as well is that he's our sponsor. So don't forget to check out www.d and the letter and exhaust.com. I know it's complicated, but I'm pretty sure if you put it in, you'll figure it out. Instagram is the letter N, D, exhaust, and Facebook and Twitter, phone, all that stuff. You can actually talk to a real person from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, Texas time at 844-D&D pipe. That's pretty fucking cool. I don't even have a landline, so that's pretty professional. So congrats on that. But we're working on a promo code, so you'll be able to order a pipe or an exhaust, which is the same thing, from these guys and maybe get a little discount. So stay tuned for that. And but anyway, I mean, if you do order anything now or you're looking at a D&D pipe after you heard that podcast, be sure to just mention that, you heard about them through the Fast Life Garage podcast. Just Fast Life Podcast. Anyway, check it out. And also, they got a lot of new pipes they've been working on, which you would have heard in our podcast. But he has an M8X, like an X pipe type header thing set up that's supposed to be making some good power if you want to still run the true dual type setup on your bagger and whatnot. And obviously the Bobcat exhaust system and, all that stuff. He's just got a pipe for every type of scenario you want to do on your Harley, and even Indian. I think it's the Indian bagger system. I think they've been working on it, and I think it's ready to go. So, go on their website, check it out, maybe give them a phone call, ask some questions. You could also hit them up on the Instagram. That's a good way to get a hold of Rusty himself, I guess you'd say. So, check them out. And like I said, don't forget to let them know that you heard about them through us. I also want to thank my boy Mark at Texas Performance Motorcycles. Always doing big things down there and helping your boy out. Check him out, texasperformancemc.com, as well as on Instagram. If you're down in Cedar Park, Texas, or Austin, Texas, or Texas in general, maybe you should make your way through there and say what's up and say hi to them. Once again, mention them that you heard about them through our podcast. That way it works for them. But check him out. He's always doing good stuff. Working on some ideas that I think I mentioned in the last podcast about doing some exhaust shootouts and some other stuff. And I know Mark's been really trying hard to get more content up himself, because he's a really big nerd when it comes to, just the workings of things. Like he has so much passion for just the simplest things. And And that's the kind of stuff you want when you're having somebody work on your bike, right? So, of course, hit them up. Texas Performance MC on Instagram and online. I also want to thank Paint Huffer Metal Flake for all the stuff they do for us and all the stuff they do for everybody in the paint industry and just whatnot. Like, they're a really stand-up company that really gives back to the artists that you know are part of the team Paint Huffer and whatnot. You can always go to their Instagram page, Paint Huffer Metal Flake, and check out a wide variety of the team members that paint using Paint Huffer Metal Flake, and then just regular customers or people that just bought the flake. It's a great place to get ideas and be inspired and all kinds of stuff. So check out their Instagram. And if you want to take the next step and pick up some flakes and some pearls or FBS tapes or some other custom paint products, wow, couldn't say that many P's at once, go to painthuffer.com and check them out. And maybe there's something there you could say, hey, I heard about you through the podcast. That's the key, right? Heard about you through the podcast. Also want to thank Horsepower Inc. for everything they've done for us. And as always, you can check out Horsepower Inc. at horsepowerinc.net. Horsepower Inc. on Instagram and Horsepower Inc. Indy on Facebook. They're out of the Indianapolis area, full service shop, just dialing in bikes. They even have, obviously they're known for the big bore throttle bodies and air cleaners, and now they have exhaust systems and just all around horsepower packages that, can get you dialed in, and dyno tuning and just everything you need to do to your V-twin. Harley V-twin. I'm not sure if they do Indian stuff yet. I might have to ask those guys. But anyway, don't forget to check them out. And just, keep it player, I guess. I don't know. Man, I feel rusty sometimes when you haven't done one of these intros in a while. Anyway, this podcast is Rick Duppstadt. And to give you a little background story on him that I can't remember if we really talked about. I don't know if you guys are real familiar with the old Iron Horse chopper thing back in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, where it was kind of like a production company chopper builder. And they were one of the big ones, one of the big powerhouses like Big Dog and Bourget and all these other companies that were out there. But Rick was one of the guys that created their custom paint department, which was fascinating. Listening to some of the stories that he was talking about, how they made some of this stuff work, and also he's been a helmet painter for years, and also been one of the, I guess, Dimebag Darrells' main homie for painting his guitars and whatnot. So I'll let him tell his story, and you guys enjoy this.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
Fast Life Podcast.
Tell everybody your name, man. Rick
Duppstadt.
Nice. So it's funny you reached out to me and stuff, and it's like I remember you from just being in the paint industry here, and your name has kind of come across the the conversations and being in shops for just the last 15 years I've been in the paint business here.
Yeah.
And when you reached out to me, I was like, man, I was like, it took a second, and then because you have one of those names where
right.
You have to say the last name with it.
Right.
It's like it's not the same unless you say the last name too. You ever had a friend like that where you're just like, oh, it's fucking Steve Jobs or something over there. It's not just Steve, Well,
and all the kids, my kids' age, everybody thinks their name's Duppstadt.
Oh.
So, yeah.
That's cool. So,
yeah, I hear you.
You said that, when you reached out to me, you said that, you kind of was, and after us just talking, you were talking about how in the 80s and 90s you were doing custom paint more or less, or was it just more?
Yeah, no, if we go all the way back, so I guess how I got started was my dad was a drag racer. I grew up going to the drag races. He did a lot of paint work just on his own stuff, so I kind of grew up
in the shop.
Yeah, in the shop, going to car shows, stuff like that. And was just always super intrigued by, the color, the brightness, just all that good stuff. And then he had a really good friend that was a pinstriper letterer that his name was Zero. So I used to always talk to Zero about, hey, how do I do this? How do that? He kind of saw my interest and pointed me the right direction, told me what kind of brushes and paints and all that good stuff to use. Then early 80s, racing motocross, helmets started coming from Troy Lee and from the guys you'd see at nationals and stuff out of California. And just thought, man, I can do that. So it's like, started painting my own stuff and buddies, stuff like that. And as you know, I mean, it just grows word of mouth mostly, and doing helmets for friends at the races and free or cheap, and then you eventually start charging, and then
you build it up from there.
And then I actually went to, while I was towards the end of racing and phasing out of that, I actually went to college, got a marketing degree, believe it or not. And then job market wasn't great at that time, plus the helmet business was just taking off on its own. So like, well, might as well give this a shot. And here 10 years later, my parents are still saying, when are you going to get a real job? Kind of deal. So I just did actually all helmets for a lot of years. And because of starting in the motocross, and back then too, you could only get a motocross helmet pretty much solid white, solid black, or orange, for water stuff, I guess, or probably winter snow sports. Maybe why they had orange. But the gear was all bright and flashy, but helmets were plain. So there was a whole industry back then of just, either matching gear or doing something for people to have, show their personality. And that's all but died now that, mass graphics are so easy to do and match the gear, and it's way cheaper. So there's hardly anybody doing it anymore in the moto world. But then with word of mouth, that gets out to where you do roll into race car stuff, and just word of mouth, you get somebody, send one out. I had some stuff published in a couple of the motocross magazines, since helmet painting was a bigger thing back then. They do articles or deals on it, and then all you needed was one, somebody in a different state or a different area to get one done, and then their friends would see it. So built a pretty good sizable clientele. And
it seems like the helmet thing, because like you were saying, there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it back then, and you had some of the big guys like Troy Lee and stuff like that. But it seems like now, like, those big guys are still there. Air Tricks, I think, is one of the big guys now. And I don't follow Troy Lee, but obviously everybody knows who he is in the helmet stuff. But it seems like now, like, what they do is they'll make these helmets really elaborate designs, and then of course it'll be a $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 helmet, and then the companies will buy it and then just reproduce them, and sell them on the shelf for a lot of them.
Some of them are that way, and then I think some of the gear companies just have a graphic guy that's doing it all on the computer. Sometimes it's better than not, but I think Troy's, a lot of his were started by hand painting the originals. Maybe not so much now that it's bigger, but I think when they first started mass producing helmets, they were probably done that way, which is the exact same way like when I was doing Dime's guitars and his signature series stuff. That's what we did. I painted the original, and then they would mass produce it off of that. And then honestly, I mean, it wasn't like a full color graphic, but that's also exactly how we did stuff at Iron Horse. And kind of fast forward.
So how'd you kind of get into the connection with Dimebag Darrell and doing his guitars and whatnot?
So Darrell and I went to high school together. Loosely probably knew of each other, weren't friends or anything. And then where my first shop was right around the corner from their dad's studio, where they recorded the first handful of albums. And then just going to shows and hanging out, and I had some mutual friends that knew him as well, and just hanging out. Then he found out what I did, and we just kind of had a mutual appreciation, I think, for each. I was obviously a big fan of the music, and then he appreciated what I was doing. And then also, too, back then, the guitar that he liked playing, the Dean ML, is the body shape, wasn't, like, Dean went out of business for a while. And the only way that he could get more guitars was as they'd go, they were mostly regional act at the time, but they'd, do shows out and about. a little bit further away, a little bit back then. And every time he went to a new city or a new area, he had checked pawn shops looking for that exact model that he liked. And some of them, the necks were fat, so I'd help him shave down the necks. Or it'd just be beat up, so we'd throw some paint on it.
Yeah.
Or he'd have 3 that looked exactly alike, So, and that was right around all the mini truck and the motocross graphic stuff, and that was also the kind of stuff that he liked and was into. So we just did a couple of guitars here or there, and then he liked it. Then we just started doing more and more.
Cool.
And he always, again, like we were talking about with the logo, social media wasn't what it was then. So he always, we just it was more of a buddy deal. I was always like, hey, if you got cash, you want to pay something, great. If not, don't worry about it. And then he was always cool with me putting my logo on that bottom fin of the guitar. So, and then back then too, most of the photography, especially at a rock show, the photographer's down on the floor looking up. So a whole lot of pictures of all those painted guitars.
That's that marketing degree right there.
They would all, and then I wasn't using helmet paint or any of that stuff back then. It was just my name, Rick Duppstadt Graphics. So it was a little harder to find back then, of course, but we branched out a little bit, and then we would do, shortly after all that's when he started getting endorsement deals, and that's when they would take, because we were already painting, guitars for himself, for him to use, and then of course they wanted to sell ones that looked like what he was playing, so they would take my originals and do like the silkscreen graphics or whatever they use for that process.
Yeah, I've never understood how they do all that silk screening, and in the chopper world, it's real common for people to do the water slide transfers.
We actually looked into doing that at Iron Horse once. There's a few, and I'm sure we'll get into that later too, but we were faced with several different challenges along the way, and at one point we went down that rabbit hole to see if that was a way we could potentially produce more, because just the demand and what we were being told we were going to have to produce in the future, Jeff and I didn't know, had no idea how we were going to
pull it off.
I mean, going back to from the very beginning.
Well, I think there's probably things about it that's cool, that like bringing it. I think it's cool how they do it on choppers. They bring like these old Frank Frazetta, or however you say his name.
So,
they bring a lot of his original artwork and they'll water slide it. Or I think it's cool when they do like old Playboy pictures, from like pinups from the 70s and shit. It's cool, but to me, it's like, man, like I couldn't do it on my stuff because I feel like I would be, I'd be lying. You know what I mean? Because I am known for airbrush, and then that's clearly not. I'm not that good, so. And
that's ultimately why we didn't pursue doing it at Iron Horse.
I think it would devalue it. I think it would devalue,
for sure,
the hand painted aspect. It's like, one thing I learned from close friend, we had him on here, Ryan Townsend.
Yep.
He is capable of doing a photorealism to a point, just like a Drew Blair or something like that. But at some point, like, you don't want your art to overpower everything, and if your shit's just like a photo, then it's either that's now the focal point and nobody cares about anything else,
right? Or
it's just a photo and people walk by and they look, oh man, like I can see flaws in this, so I can appreciate it more.
For sure.
As ass backwards as that is.
No, I get it, because there's some helmet guys that are doing, they'll do names or whatever where they're doing actual printed print vinyl or whatever the material is. But as soon as you can, and myself looking at it, like I'll think it looks really great, and then you look at it, and as soon as you know or you can tell that it's printed, then I'm out. It's like you lose the appreciation for it. So
it's crazy how
I'm
that
with
works.
You there.
But
and that's the same thing with Jeff Long, with the early days when he and I were figuring out and going through the trials at Iron Horse, trying to figure out how to grow. That was one thing, once we were investigating that we kind of told each other, is no matter what, we were going to stay true to, the hand painting, and that's, I would like to think that's what sold the bikes early on, and to the end, we always had great fit and finish, and would hear direct response from that. So we took a lot of pride in that, and we could never probably allow ourselves to take that step and fall off into the pre-printed.
Yeah, so how long, with you doing the helmet thing, and what was kind of like some of the things you were dealing with in the trials and tribulations. And this was like basically mid 90s or late 90s.
For Iron Horse?
No, for the helmets, like your original helmet gig. And doing the guitars and kind of doing your own thing as the Rick Duppstadt thing.
Just the...
I think I said
being a small...
Duppstadt.
Yeah, it's all good. Being a small shop, I mean, probably same thing you run into a lot that you find is there's only so much you yourself can do. There's only so many hours in a day. There's only so much you can do. So you're limited there. So we're always, I was always looking for ways to try to do more. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you have ups and downs of the amount of work that comes in. And back then too, like we've been saying, the social media, since it wasn't the way it was a little harder to get the word out. It was more print, brochures and stuff like that. So it was a little bit harder to grow. And although I feel like I probably had a larger out-of-state or not local clientele than I did local, probably similar to what you're seeing looks like, just talking briefly.
There's some weird deal that I think that people, like customers, like there's a different, I don't know if the word is vibe or feeling when you have an out-of-state job getting done. Like, it's almost like a bragging right. Well, I'm having my shit done somewhere else. For sure. So it's something weird. I don't understand it because there's people here in Dallas Fort Worth that have money that can afford to do the jobs that I do, but they choose to go to California or they choose to go somewhere else, and then rightfully so. There's a lot of talented people in California that get a lot of California work, but we get a lot of California work too, and it's kind of like
there's a lot of badasses here too.
Yeah, I've always a lot of people are gonna hate me for saying this, but when I first started flying to California to do work, and the more people I met out there doing like badass shit, none of them are from California. Yeah, right. It's always the Midwest. It seems like the Midwest kind of produces the grit of a good fabricator or painter, designer. But then they go out there where the opportunities are to shine and flourish, and that's kind of what I've noticed. A lot of it, Hell, fucking the dude Ryan from that Counts Customs, he's from Temple, Temple, Texas. Really? Yeah, he made a name here in Temple, Texas, doing mini trucks, and then went to California, and now he's in Vegas on a TV show. You know what I mean? You know
what? Now that you say that, I think. Do you know Carl Tyndall?
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, he used to talk about Ryan, and he was from East Texas and out that direction. So I bet that's where that came from. Now that you say it,
it's a strange thing because, like I said, California is like it's great weather, so hot rod culture is big out there. Motorcycle culture is big, and people,
shit ton of people.
There's just a lot more like per capita of like people doing this stuff. So it's like it's the hub, but I think that there's a lot of talented people across the nation that some of them are either like super talented or just complete or good with where they're at, and then there's a lot of people that jump ship and go to Cali, and I think that's
true.
I think a lot of people are transplanted there that do really good work.
There's some. I think with helmets, since they are so mobile and they've always been easy to ship, it's easy to do work outside. So I think a lot of the helmet painters probably stay put. Yeah. You've got Ryan Young with Indasil, I guess is how you pronounce it. Yeah. He's in North Carolina, and
he's one of the big ones too.
Yeah, he does a lot. And then Tyler, I don't even know how to, having a jacked up name like I have, you'd think I'd understand how to say his. But anyway, the dude at Sinsport, he does good clean work. And I don't think I don't know exactly where he's from, but I don't think it's West Coast.
Well, I think the helmet guys, like obviously North Carolina is where like the Hall of Fame is of NASCAR and all that stuff. Yeah. So, you got more. NASCAR's a big thing for that, and I know a lot of guys that do NASCAR helmets. Hockey helmets is big. Like I got a buddy, Paint Zoo, fucking badass guy. And he does like his thing is hockey helmets, and he kills it. But he's out of Pittsburgh, I think. I want to say it's right around Pittsburgh, so it's like that's hockey territory, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I narrowly missed ending up in North Carolina. It was after Iron Horse died for the second time. Spoke with the guys at Indian when they were doing one of their revival runs, trying to revive that brand, and they were at the time located out there. So they brought me out to look, and it was literally a blank canvas. It's like, okay, here's where the shop would be. You'd set it up, build it, do whatever, and of course, then using some of the things we learned at Iron Horse, but never panned out. And pretty glad it didn't at this point.
So when did you get into the Iron Horse thing? Like, when did that opportunity unfold?
So Jeff Long, he and I started painting helmets about the same time. We raced motocross against and with each other, so we knew each other from there. Started painting helmets about the same time, but which I've also heard you mention, and it's maybe more common now, where you're like friendly and talk with other painters and other people, where back then a lot of the older guys, it seemed like it was, a national secret. Nobody, everybody thought what they did was some top secret whatever and didn't want to talk that much, where he and I, we're the same age, same mindset, really kind of going, or not kind of, I guess we were going after the exact same market, but we were also remained friends and would talk customers or back and forth, which also allowed us to keep our prices the same as each other. We were never undercutting each other, so we were able to, keep the prices where they should be, and we learned together and talked. So he was in Irving, kind of Dallas side of town, and I was based in Arlington, in the west side of town. He actually did more local stuff than I did, and I think for a good while I probably did more out-of-state stuff than he did. So even though we were so close together, we never really competed, I guess, with each other, and remained friends through that. So did nothing but helmets. Then the motorcycle world we kind of started dipping into around the same time. Jeff was doing a lot of Fairlesses and stuff back then, the early stuff. Just local guys, I think those were in the kind of the rebirth of Harleys and stuff, kind of died off. The old guys that, never left. Of course, they were still there, but it was when it was becoming popular again with guys that maybe didn't ride so much is when we jumped in. And then Jeff was I think he did the first ones, or I know he did the first ones for Bill Rucker and Tim Edmondson, who started Iron Horse. And
I worked with Tim Edmondson's son for a while.
Okay, yeah. Matt.
He was a fuck up at the time, but
weren't we all to some degree, right? So we, Jeff was doing those. Then as his workload increased, they started bringing me some. Then we started kind of splitting the jobs back and forth. They talked Jeff into closing his doors and going in-house. And then Jeff was there not quite a year, and it got really busy, and he needed to grow and expand again. So they talked me into doing the same thing. So I closed the doors of my shop, and we knew we worked well together and had been friends for a long time. So we started then. We were in a different building they weren't in the big factory yet either, but the paint shop was down the street on Vickery in Fort Worth at the time. And we were doing 3 bikes a week at that time. And
so for everybody that, we have a lot of younger people that listen to this too.
Yeah.
They don't know what. So Iron Horse was one of the, how would you describe it? It was more of like a production chopper kind of manufacturer.
So I guess I can't completely speak for them, but I believe the mindset at the time is because it was back when there was a waiting list to buy a Harley.
Yeah.
So you couldn't just go to a dealership and buy it without being on a list. So they saw the opportunity of, hey, we're going to make a production. You want to make a Harley with all the
bells and whistles,
mods and everything, whatever, already chromed, all the things people were doing at the time anyway. We're going to do that right off the bat. And they were able to grow the brand and offer a product because that was the only option for a lot of people. And they were doing, it was good stuff. So, and you could get, if you were going to buy a Harley and strip it down and paint it and do all that stuff, you could just buy an Iron Horse.
Yeah, it was already done.
That already had, S&S motor, already had motor work done to it, essentially. So that opened up a good market for them. And then it evolved into different models and, what were we, 11, 12 years first run? And then market, a little bit of mismanagement, a little bit of the market dying off, several different reasons, I think. Went through one bankruptcy, and then a guy from Montana bought it, and we made another run probably 6 months after it closed the first time. We made another run for about a year, but still never really got back into the production side of things. It was more one-offs, and
Yeah, kind of like a downsized business. Yeah.
Yeah, but we still had our building at the end, 224,000 square foot. So it's a huge facility, a lot of overhead. So if you weren't going to run production, it would have been hard to maintain it. And there were some other challenges that prevented him from being able to thrive at the time. But so we started just doing the Harley knockoff kind of thing, and then we evolved into the chopper models and 4 or 5 different models. So we called it production custom.
Yeah,
was essentially what it was. And when I joined, brought I had 1 or 2 guys with me, brought them with me, joined Jeff's group. We were doing 3 bikes a week, and did that for few months, and I could still remember it like it was yesterday. Bill came to us and said, we need to get to 5 bikes a week, which we told him, you're crazy, that's like a whole paint job every day. It's just, how are we going to do that? So we beefed up the staff and everything, but all along and Bill was saying, well, we're going to keep going, so you better figure out a way to do it. So we had a challenge of where are we going to find that many custom painters, because he and I were doing a bulk of we were laying it out, doing the spot color, pinstriping it, airbrushing it, clear coating. Then you could bring... Mind
you, this was also before, so the TV show stuff was kind of happening, but, watching all those TV shows, and I went back and watched, all the biker build-offs. I can't really sit through all the American Chopper shit, so I saw some of it. But then all the Jesse James stuff, and there is reference to painters and airbrush artists and things like that, but they never really got a full floor, like the metal shaping and things like that.
Yep.
So there was people like me. I'm a product of that. I saw Monster Garage and it made me want to paint, or I was already in the paint business, but it made me want to go the other direction. With it.
Yeah.
Now, at that time, you had to kind of know people in the industry or be a gearhead, like automotive or whatever, from the that to be in the custom paint. And nowadays it's like you just follow a couple things on Instagram, and next thing you know, you're trying to custom paint. So
exactly,
I understand. I can imagine myself understanding the complexity of finding talent to put in those shoes.
Yeah, and as you can imagine too, like even though we were only doing 3 and then fairly quickly 5 bikes a week, it was still a lot. And the thought of, how every painter, you got a different style, even flame jobs, you've got different shaped flames, where that was another thing we wanted to stay true to, was not only keeping everything hand painted and all that good stuff, but was consistent. The style. We used to say it's like McDonald's. When you go to McDonald's in another state, you buy a quarter pounder, it tastes the same. Same thing with our dealer network. When you order a flame job, or you see a bike on the floor and you order a flame job, it needs to look at least like the same style. So that was another challenge, is when we tried to bring in guys that were established or had a decent custom paint background. They already have a style established.
It was harder to break that style than it was to help someone develop one.
Yeah, for sure. So you had to take young guys or guys that were doing just bits and pieces of it or weren't quite fully developed yet, and try to get them in our system. But then you got to get them, the same thing. The challenges of those of us that are creative aren't always easy to manage. That kind of thing too. So it's...
Well, one of the guys that, before I learned how to airbrush, one of the guys that worked for you guys, his name was Shane. He was a real short guy.
Shane Vick.
Yeah.
Yep.
He did a lot of my airbrush work for my company at the beginning, because we were relatively young together.
Yeah.
And we were pretty hungry, and Shane did a lot of... Because Shane was the fire guy. He did all the real fire on all the shit.
We had a few guys, but he did, And
so he would get out of work and go and hustle fire all over town.
Yeah.
And that's what he was doing.
A lot of people. That stuff, man, I can't draw a blank on what's his name, the guy who did the first ones of that. But that created a job.
Mike Valley. Yeah, Mike LaValle. The guy that invented the fire paint job? Yeah, it's Mike LaValle.
I'm not 100% sure. It might have been LaValle. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There were a lot of people. There was a lot of paint jobs with real fire, some better than others on it, for sure. So anyway, so that led us to kind of going back a little bit to the 5 bikes a week, translates to 1 a day, having to figure out We did bring in a few painters that knew, and it maybe wouldn't work out for one reason or another. Either they didn't like punching the clock, or it was hard to get them to break their style, or just personalities or whatever. So as you can imagine, which those times were absolutely crazy back in the shop. But so it wasn't the easiest place to work for sure, especially for somebody new just coming in. You had to pay your dues with the hazing.
That's
and
why
stuff.
it needs to be in every business.
It was awesome. But anyway, Jeff and I, we kind of broke down the system and made it into different steps. So we broke it down to, you got a layout department, a masking department, a spot color, and just did an assembly line like that. And we grew it. I mean, it went, of course, the processes changed and had to tweak, and we automated as much as we could when we could. But the original ones were always hand done. And like we had evolved into, we'd do the first one by hand, and then we'd have our graphic guys come in and take digital photos and scan them and clean everything up to where then we could cut the designs in vinyl. So like flames, for instance, not only were they easier to do, but we could also 100% guarantee that it's the same style as the first ones that we did. And it can't be left so much translation, and with the production requirements that we eventually had to get to.
If you can just like have vinyl templates for a flame job per side and panel, dude, that would cut down the time. And
we could cut a set, and then you pull the negatives or the positive depending on the color. If you're spraying the graphic color first, then you just lay down the positive image of it and shoot around it, or we had the negative side of it. And we actually attempted to take it a step further, because even with that, you still got to understand how the tank sits on the bike, the flow of the flames. So, even having that, and you get somebody to get one side cockeyed, it's leaning uphill, and the other side's, flat or lean downhill. So we actually had the machine shop where we were build a jig, because we were dealing with the same exact, we only had 3 fenders, maybe 2-3 front fenders, 2 gas tanks. So we had a limited number of type of part. So they made a fixture that would hold all of our parts, that then had like an arm with a laser that would shoot down with registration marks. Or we tried cutting registration marks in the vinyl too. So then that took away, you didn't even have to have an artistic eye to line everything up. You could just, as long as you could match up the X's.
That makes sense though, with the task of like creating, as close to hand painted paint jobs as possible in the time frame, and knocking out 5 a week without having a crew of and all that, like you said before, and the personalities and the egos and things that are going to come with it. So
that was our first jump from 3 to 5. At our peak, we were doing 25 a day.
You
to give you an idea. Yeah.
Wow.
25.
That's a jump.
25 a day. So I had 3 shifts of base coaters, 3 shifts of clear coaters, 3 shifts of buffers, 2 or 3 shifts in the body shop. And then, of course, the skilled areas, it was hard to get. Actually, like Jeff Thornton, we had a few of the like T-shirt or mural guys come in and try to do some second shift stuff for us. That it didn't work out.
Well, y'all had like
great.
that one-off program too, where you get to paint jobs. Like Sissel was known.
Sissel, yeah. We had some really good, talented airbrush guys. But again, our structure, as we grew, like when we were doing 25 paint jobs a day, I want to say the factory overall, we had maybe 600 people or so. So you had to, it was necessary for it to be managed and run like a large production.
And these bikes were selling though, right?
Oh yeah, yep. There was a period in time where every bike going down the assembly line was already sold.
Wow.
And then I want to say by the time we were up to probably, I don't know how many a day. I'd be lying if I told you the number. But at some point, then we became able to produce a volume that we could do floor planning and give dealers around the country enough to have bikes sitting on the floor and all that good stuff. But with that larger size and doing that number of bikes, also you had to have the structure around it, which is cool if that's what you're used to, like working in a warehouse or maybe even the assembly line. A lot of shops, they're doing it that way. But the paint shop, that's a different story. Those dudes are not cool with punching a clock, showing up at 7 o'clock ready to start painting and getting a 5-minute break when the bell rings and go to lunch when the bell rings and then leave. And early days we had a lot of overtime, and from our standpoint, trying to, Jeff and I treated it and ran it like it was our shop. I mean, and that was kind of how it was sold to us and followed through with. It was the same as when we were self-employed, just without the headache and the BS. Somebody else is doing payroll and insurance, and that was the cool side of it.
That was a blessing though, because around that same time, you guys employed a lot of custom painters. Dino's out in Phoenix had a lot of custom painters. Area 5150 had a lot of custom painters.
It's funny you mentioned those two, because we brought in guys from both of those shops that came.
I used to love Dino's, man. Dino's had a couple productions, because they did all Bourgette's bikes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And Dino's had a couple paint jobs. Back in the day when one of my only tricks was flame jobs.
You're right.
They just had a couple of jobs that were just so fucking badass. And I remember we would do repairs on them when I worked the other side.
Yep.
And I would just study them. I would study. That's one thing about a lot of painters is we look at something, another person's work. And it depends on if you're an asshole or not. If you're an asshole, you're looking for flaws. But me, I always like dissect it. Okay, he did this first, then this.
Yep.
And I try to understand how he did it. And it's like a problem solving puzzle.
100%. And that's exactly what I did. Yeah. And and I've heard you mention it before too. And I'm probably a lot of the same way. Is it's not necessarily. I mean, I guess you got to have some natural ability, and some of it comes naturally, or else you die on the vine, go broke. But had to work really, really hard to get decent at it.
Yeah.
So same thing. So looking at somebody, you're not trying to rip off the style or whatever, but you are, exactly like you said, trying to dissect. What did you do first? What did they do second?
How would I approach this paint job?
And then how do I take what they did and make it mine?
Yeah, exactly.
Or you even trying to duplicate something sometimes. It would
I think that when you're young, like when you're fresh in this thing, like I don't see anything wrong with someone like. I know people get butthurt about people, taking paint jobs and styles, but I can't tell you how many baggers I've painted and then seen someone else paint it, and it's on the cover of a magazine. Yeah, somebody else paint it. There are people at SEMA right now painting bikes that I can show you with the bike paint jobs that they stole from me.
Yeah, oh for sure.
But
and how many of us? I mean, who's going to claim that they originated the flame job? You know what I mean? There's so much. It goes so far back. It gets recycled. Everything, I think.
When you bring it up though.
Yeah.
When you get all butthurt about it, it makes you look threatened.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, all right, I did a badass paint job that inspired a lot of people to want to copy it.
Yeah.
That means I did a good job. That means, nobody wants, but I mean, look, I did one paint job and I got paid off of it, right?
Yep. Exactly.
So I'm not ever getting another dime off this paint job. And obviously I'm not the kind of person that'll do another paint job exactly the same way for 5 more people.
Yeah, right.
So somebody else does the paint job, I can't be mad at them.
And then you can't help. And I know a few years ago when Jeff was back painting helmets again, just a couple years ago, and he had a customer bring him a helmet that wanted an exact duplicate of something else. So he honored, and I could be getting the story wrong, it's secondhand, of course, but so he did the paint job exactly like they wanted, which, somebody else obviously painted the original, and then she went to a national or something somewhere, wore the helmet, and then he got blown out on social media by all these new helmet gods, that, oh, you stole my design and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's like, come on. Yeah. It's funny because there's nobody, none of us are doing anything 100% unique. I mean, there's Von Dutch, is anybody... Is he gonna? Everybody stole pinstripes from him.
There's so many different variations of the amount of pinstripe designs that are out there. There has to be some duplicates there.
Absolutely.
But I just tell people don't get so caught up in that. I mean, finding inspiration from people is one thing. Ripping off things color for color, line for line is another thing. And if you're on a certain level, you don't have to do that. But I mean, I get it. If you're a fresh guy in the bike scene and you're not very creative. Yep. And I get it. I see where they're going to do that. They got to eat, but I'm not proud of them, and I don't think that's the best way to go about it. But I can't stop them.
Yeah, right.
So
and one-offs is different too. Like if somebody's going to take a design you did and then somehow mass produce it, take credit for it, and mass produce it, and generate revenue from that.
If Bell took my helmet design and just redesigned it and making money off it, I would have an issue with that.
Yep.
But some dude out of his garage that digs my style and wants to kind of mimic it to practice and learn his style.
Yep.
I'm not mad at that guy.
No.
And if he makes some money off of it, I'm glad that I helped you pay your rent this month.
And to me, I mean, you should feel lucky that you did something good enough that somebody wants to rip it off.
Exactly.
If you're doing stuff nobody wants to rip off, you might not be doing something right.
So what was like some of the like as a painter yourself, like once you got in that position of, you know, running Iron Horse with Jeff, like how did you get to paint a lot, or did you kind of find yourself more of a business guy and a manager and an operations manager type guy over being an artist?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it's kind of been the way from the very get-go, you know, because like I started painting while I was, at the tail end of high school and while I was going to college. So having the degree and kind of spending half of my day doing, you know, more, you know, book stuff or what have you, and then going and painting second, it's like from day one, that's the way I've been, is, you know, basically half business, half paint. So from that end, it wasn't really anything new. Early on at Iron Horse, we had to do a whole lot of the painting. It's just because we were the only ones doing
staff,
it. Yeah. And our staff, the guys that we had working for us that were just learning, you know, most of them back then were just helping, whether it was prep or finish out and then, you know, clear coat or whatever the simple steps. And then some of those guys actually ended up evolving and being some of our better artists and painters. But myself, heavier on the paint side in the beginning, and then evolved into hardly doing it in the end, for several different reasons. And we'd stay, and to this day, I still try to paint enough on the side to keep my chops sharp, be able to pull a straight line, and you know, just to stay involved a little bit. And same back then, whether it was, you know, doing guitars or something different than the main gig, or Jeff, myself, Sissel, I know, had a hand in some. One of our other guys, Kevin Howard, he was pretty heavy into designs and stuff like that. So we would do the first run every model year. We would do new designs, and those we would do ourselves.
Well, you also got to figure out, once you've done those designs, how to mass produce it,
right,
and have all these other people reproduce them.
Right.
So that's a job in itself of just, you know.
Absolutely. So we stayed painting, even though it was fewer. It was still pretty heavy into it, and then real heavy on the management side because of trying to grow the staff. And then also too, like we had mentioned, we ran out of people who already knew what they were doing, and had to start bringing people in who didn't. So, and one of our, in fact, I think he's still pinstriping today, Michael Keaton.
I heard he was one of the best in town.
Well, when he first came to us, he was like walking around the plant, stumbled in, hadn't held a paint gun, a paintbrush, nothing. But he's a badass guitar player. So right then, you know, he's got great hand-eye coordination.
Yeah.
You know, and he started out sanding parts and doing stuff and just worked himself through the system. And I believe he's one of the few people that literally worked every single step and every single area. You know, started out in the body shop, went to buffing, went to layout, you know, went to masking, and then went to pinstriping. So then at one point, a lot of my day involved with, and then just the whole time of bringing in people, some did not know what they were doing, others had a inkling and had just started, and we were just trying to get them polished to where, because that's the other challenge is, like you and I and everybody else who started doing it themselves, your quality as you're learning is clearly or obviously not that great, but you're not charging very much. And then as you get better, you can charge more and all that. Well, we're taking these guys who would be painting or just starting out and not charging very much, and then throwing them into an environment where they're having to produce, you know, $8,000 paint jobs or whatever it is. So it's got to be perfect. It's got to be good right off the bat.
So that's like probably the best education anybody could ever got in the custom paint world.
It was a double-edged sword because we had, it was great. Just like you said, it was a great introduction, and it allowed us, you know, we were bringing guys in and setting them in a room, and they were getting paid. They were on the clock. They're getting paid to sit in a room for 8 hours and practice. So, and when could you do that, right?
Yeah,
if you're doing it yourself, you're practicing, hoping you can make money.
You're practicing on a tank
that you're selling. Yeah, exactly. So
that's the invention of the razor strike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no kidding. So that allowed, that helped get people up to speed there, but it's also was tough on us because, as you know, you also had to get good quick if that's the job you're doing, because you're gonna starve if you can't get good and reduce your mistakes. You can't make any money.
Yeah.
Well, those guys, and in that environment, you can make a mistake and you're almost rewarded, because then you had to redo it. You're on overtime, getting paid time and a half. So you got, and in a way, you're getting rewarded for screwing something up.
Damn.
So there were challenges to get around that.
And you said y'all were having them stripe with House of Color at that time. So that,
correct.
I've always used House of Color. I've never really been a guy of one shot or anything.
Yep.
But I guess my one shot friends are always telling me that you can pull more consistent, longer lines with one shot as opposed to. I think House of Color is easier to work with in the tighter spots.
Yeah, and the bigger problem though, and gosh, I don't feel like I'm that old, but I guess when you date back to when I started, like my very first paint jobs were lacquer color, one shot, hand pin stripes, and then urethane clear. So to get the one shot dry enough and or to spray the clear dry enough, you had to dry spray it for 2-3 coats to try to build a barrier so that it wouldn't penetrate and reactivate that synthetic enamel and wrinkle and react. So that was the biggest thing when House of Color brought their striping paint out. It was like a godsend for us, because you could stripe it, you could clear it immediately, you could clear it the next day, you could clear it a week later, and it wasn't going to react. That was the best thing. I've never painted signs and used used one shot extensively enough to know the ins and outs. I could imagine that you can pull longer lines because it stays wet. The one shot's going to stay wet longer, being a synthetic, and it dries slow so that it dries glossy.
You just think that some of these companies would realize that one shot was designed as sign paint, and then when it started being an automotive application, most of it was used on top of the clear.
Right.
And so it's like House of Color figured it out in the 90s to do this, but you would think that the evolution of that idea of pinstriping that's clear or urethane compatible would have been something that somebody's invested in at some point to make a better line or pull a better product. And I think
that's where the House of Color came from, because it was pretty early on. I mean, because we hadn't been doing urethane too many years when it came out. And I want to say it was maybe Troy Lee. I mean, just being a kid, being a little bit younger than him, and obviously looking up, I'd call out there, just being a paint dork, I was
paint nerd.
Yeah. And then I made a couple trips out there too and hang out in his shop was in an airplane hangar back then, but he was cool. I mean, he'd, hey, come up, hang out, whatever. So I want to say that's where I first heard, but there for a while we were even trying to catalyze the one shot where you'd kind of dip the brush and use catalyst like a reducer.
Yeah.
But then it's hard to keep it consistent. You start to get a little bit heavy with catalyst and it dries too quick, and then you don't get enough and you think you're cool, and then at one spot reacts, which really sucks when the whole paint job's finally done.
Yeah.
And you're on the very last step with a customer ready to pick it up the next day. And then that
you
was
don't
all
want that
pain in the ass back then. So it was good to get past that. But yeah, no, I hear you. And I think I believe, again, I never did signs or on top of clear enough to know, but I believe House of Color had a product to kind of make it act more like one shot, where it slows the dry time.
Yeah.
Where you can, and probably make it more durable, where you can put it on top of clear.
Yeah, they have hardeners and stuff to kind of make it more durable.
Yeah.
But and I want to say the DuPont had the hot hues.
Yes.
Pinstripe colors.
Yeah, I think they maybe dabbled in a little bit. We used some of the hot hues at Iron Horse. We were using for most of the time. We did a small stint with Sickens and had some issues there, but then fairly quickly went back to Spies Hecker. So we used Spies Hecker a majority of the time at Iron Horse, but we still use House of Color, graphic colors, and pinstriping paint and candies and stuff like that.
The reason I used to always use that growing up, and even to this day sometimes, is I started in the sport bike thing, and those things were getting fucked up all the time.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use Passion Pearl purple because I know when this dipshit wrecks his bike, then I can just go buy that cord off the shelf. And
Exactly.
instead of trying to go all crazy and make all these custom colors. So it was like,
for sure.
You were trying to keep it to where it was like, okay, well, this guy's going to scratch it, but I want to have some paint left over to do a repair, and it's not going to kill me.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Well, and we were doing enough volume that we had some access to higher levels in the different paint companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so we used Hot Hues pretty early on, since Speedsucker was a DuPont product. We knew a lot of those guys. And then when they brought Hot Hues in, we dabbled with it a little bit. But one thing we ran into with the House of Color candies is with the bleed. You know, some of like the Burple, man, you could
that
you'd
shit'll
be sanding
bleed
it.
through everything.
Your sanding sludge through your thing clear.
I'll tell you this
will be
crazy
blue.
story. The first time, my first Burple experience ever, this is so funny and embarrassing. It was a Burple bike, right?
Yep.
And I didn't do, I used the KK. No, it was either KK or KBC Burple, right? So still the dye is still
both,
in there.
yeah.
And it was Burple in white, right? And this is like the 5th bike I've ever painted in my life. You know what I mean? Sport bike. So I just painted it all. I'm like spraying in some shop in Haslett in a 10x10 like office in front of like a strip mall shop center.
Right.
And I clear it, and I'm like, fuck yeah, it looks good. And I come back for the next coat, and all that Burple like sank through the white.
Oh,
not
you did the white on top of the Burple.
Yeah, not consistently.
Yeah, right,
just
super
horrible.
splotchy, yeah.
So I was like, fuck, man. And I, like I said, that I think that painters nowadays have it way better than I know that I had it, because I had nobody to ask.
Yep.
It's like if I wasn't working for Gary or one of the paint shops, you were outcasted and you were like not allowed to come around. And if you were allowed, then it was fighting, and it was a lot different. Now dudes are like, man, I'm having a tough time. They'll reach out on Instagram or ask you a question in person, and it's like everybody's cool. But man, back then it's like trial and error.
Dude,
that's the only way.
When I was first starting, everything I learned in the beginning was the little bit that was on the back of the can and the dudes behind the counter.
Yeah.
And then now being on the paint manufacturer side, that scares the hell out of me. Like those guys, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Having to take their word.
Same thing for
a
you.
lot of that stuff.
Same thing for a lot of the artists that were working for you guys at Iron Horse. It's the same thing for me when I worked for Gary. I was like, holy fuck, I get to go to work every day.
Yep.
And I'm around talented people.
Yeah.
And I'm getting to not only see them, I'm doing my job. I'm apprenticing, I'm wet sanding, buffing, doing all this other shit, but I get to see a custom paint job being done in the corner. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't for me catching that opportunity at 20, 21, 22, there's no way I would have been able to kind of make the sacrifice to work for $250 a week sanding bikes.
Yeah, right. For sure. And that, yeah, exactly like you said. We had some really talented people there, and it was a different, how to explain it. Once you got in those walls and you were there long enough, to the detriment, trying to go back into it. Mm-hmm. It's like anybody that, if you built your name and you started getting work and all that stuff, I mean, I think that's probably a good portion. I mean, I feel like my name pretty well died out. You built a pretty good clientele and people know who you are, and then you spend 10 years there and your only signature is that horse head that is, corporate. And I mean, and I like, there's bikes that I physically painted 90% of. Maybe I didn't clear coat it, one of the sessions of clear, but there's a couple bikes that I painted primarily all of it, and my name is nowhere, and it was featured in a magazine, but it's an Iron Horse bike painted by Iron Horse Paint and all that. Not my name nowhere. So
did y'all have to deal with a lot of like comebacks and stuff through the paint process, as far as like dealing with flaws and reactions? And
no, man, that was another area where, like we talked about, didn't want to sacrifice any of the artwork, but we also stayed true to using high-end products. Mm-hmm. And as far as we knew, we were going to be in business 50, 100 years or whatever. And so we were acid washing the bottoms of the fenders and red brown prime. I mean, we were priming everything and undercoating so that they didn't get rock chips, because we didn't want something coming back 10 years with rust, rusting through a fender. And
I learned that process too. And what I get with a lot of people now is like, it's a trend to paint the inside of the fenders now. And I'm like, you're fucking retarded.
Yeah,
one rock chip, and then you get rust, and then it just...
Yep, exactly.
So it's like...
that black rubberized undercoat
Dude,
is the
that's where
best
it's at.
thing ever. Yeah. And it looks good, too. I mean, it's black. It's dark. It's dark if you can see it. But so we did everything with high-end products to keep it from coming back. And that was one thing we always had a lot of pride in. And I think the paint companies even used some of what we were doing, is we never had anything come back for... either materials or whatever. We had stuff like, we had a warranty paint department, but a lot of times it was for like, you get a batch of bad kickstand springs and the bike falls over, then you got to fix the tank.
Yeah.
Or, have dudes riding with a wallet chain and beats the hell out of the rear fender and then he tries to claim that he's got rock chips or whatever,
Yeah.
So it's only on one side, not the front of the fender. You know what it is, but you're going to take care of the guy.
Fucking
especially
wallet
then.
chains.
Yeah. Right. And, but we never for materials there for a while, and that was the issue we had with Sikkens eventually. And I'm sure it's great in the collision world, but we were led to believe that we had a pretty open window, which with Spies Hecker we did, is wide open. And with the Sikkens, it turned out that it did have a recoat window. So we did have a run of where you just get the bike looks great, buffs, and then a couple of months down the road, whenever it gets its first rock chip, clear with D-lam off the base coat, just in sheets, because there was just no adhesion there at all. So we ended up having to fix a lot of stuff there, and that was the only thing from product or workmanship or anything like that as far as, so never comebacks. Except for we did go through some time and experimented with a bunch of different ways on filler necks, trying to keep those clean and people
from having the gas peeling up and
trying to seal that
Yeah.
and then still get a good seal with the cap. And we tried a whole bunch of different things, and then always found that if you scraped it down to the bare metal where it could get a good seal and never get to the paint, worked the best, but it looked like hell. So the sales and the front office was never good. We didn't like it going out, so then we tried some different products just to make it look better. And I think the best thing we tried the different chrome rings. What do they call those? Paint savers.
Yeah.
Then it'll eventually creep up under that sometimes too if it doesn't get a good seal. So,
well, we used to do the super glue thing around the edges. A nice little run of super glue, and then I guess the super glue is kind of resistant to gas a little bit, I'm
not sure. We did a similar. It wasn't super glue, but we did another
like
two-part epoxy type of product.
I remember
similar
seeing a lot of
thing.
that.
Yeah, and we actually used the vinyl mask on that too, where it was a perfect circle and you could lay it down and it looked, it made it at least look nice. When
it's crazy because I learned how to do all the vinyl cutting and understand the vinyl process through Sissel.
Yeah.
When I worked, because when Sissel left there, he had a little shop in Arlington.
Wasn't Shane with him there too?
Shane worked there.
Bones?
And Bones was coming there every once in a while.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
and then,
I know that shop.
The Mexican dude, little Mexican dude, I guess he was a flame layout guy for a while.
Yeah.
He was there.
A few of those though.
Yeah.
That's like saying the guy on the assembly line, the one with long hair and tattoos.
Yeah. So there was a bunch of, and again, I found myself stuck in a room full of talented people, and that's honestly working there. Yeah. That's how I learned to do computer, vinyl cutting and understand all that stuff.
That's awesome.
And then, it was still 2 years from me ever learning how to airbrush, but having Sissel do stuff for me, Shane doing stuff for me, and then Sissel, just being around him all the time.
Wasn't he trying to do canvas stuff and do some other things as well at that shop?
Yeah,
was that the one?
He had a great concept, man. I want to get him on here at one point in time, but he had a great concept. He's a lover of art. Yeah. And he's an amazing artist. You know what I mean? And sure. But like a lot of artists, especially his age and at that time, like that's the only place to make money was in custom paint. And then soon after the custom paint thing blossomed, then the tattoo industry blew up.
For sure, yeah.
And so a lot of people that were into art was able to find an outlet through that, and the culture that came of that with like T-shirts and all this different shit that kind of blossomed from the tattoo culture, all because of TV shows. Miami Ink and fucking all that stuff.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it's almost weird too because when the biker shows got big, and then the whole concept of TV show car stuff, so like the Boyd show that was on, and then you had West
Chet
Coast,
Foose.
Chet Foose, all these shows. I kind of, and that could be wrong, and don't hold me to this, but I felt like then you started seeing like paint companies other than House of Color start to bring custom lines like Hot Hues and Vibrance from PPG. People wanted, like, these normal companies that were mainly collision wanted their custom line, so that the custom shit could also have, they can go through them instead of having to go through House of Color.
Yeah, Sherwin had one too. They were just starting to phase out when I switched sides of the fence and went to the manufacturer side. They were just starting to phase out their Planet Color.
Yeah, Planet Color, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and they had some good stuff. They had some innovative stuff too. That was pretty cool. But yeah, going back to being in that same room. So in that environment that we had, and that's what led me to talking about kind of getting away from your name, is once everybody was there for a little bit, you kind of lost you let your guard down because you weren't trying to make a name for yourself any longer. You were working for the man, and they beat that part out of us, I guess. But you also, so you were a little more, you wanted to help the guy sitting next to you or in the next room because it was hard to get to go home during some of those times when we had some pretty big production demands put on us, and we spent a lot of hours there at different points of time. So the fact that if you could get somebody else up to speed and that would relieve your load and you might be able to go home, at a decent time, sometimes there was some extra motivation too, I think, for people to help.
It's got to be different too, because when you run your own shit, sometimes that time thing doesn't bother you. Like, I don't mind being here fucking 14 hours a day, but when you're working in a place that you don't get to decorate, it kind of changes it, or it's not
you're told when to go on break and all that. Yeah. And that, speaking of Sissel, it'd be funny to hear his version or whatever.
I've heard stories. I don't want to bring him up because I want him to come on here and tell them, because they're awesome.
From our Norse?
Something about it. I will say this. He had somebody wanted him to do a tank in a really retarded amount of time.
Yeah, and that's where I was headed with that.
He just smiley faced it and walked out or some shit.
Yeah, I had to actually fire him over that. There's just something that led up to it, and it was eventful, and it all sucked. And of course, I knew I was going to see him later, which we did. I mean, and that was always weird. But that again, though, he had to get to that point though too. He had already, like I said, when you're punching a clock and you're doing that, and you're taking these creative guys and trying to put them in a very structured environment, it was really hard. It was hard to manage on our end, but it was hard for people to adapt to. And he did a good job for the longest time, but then there's only so long you can tame a tiger.
He's been working the other side since I want to say 09 or 10, because I went and worked I rented space out of his shop for a while and did my own thing. And
you were doing sport bike stuff, right?
Yeah, I was doing sport bike
Carl
stuff.
kind of turned me on to some of your stuff back then. I remember seeing some of it.
Carl did a lot of shit too, because he used to do a lot of that stuff.
T-shirt world and all that, right?
And then so then I've always kind of had, my shop used to be called Live Fast Airbrush, Live Fast Customs, this, that, and the other back in the day.
Yep.
And so I ended up coming back to this side of town where I'm kind of more accustomed to, and then at some point Sissel and Bones tried to do this big art training facility, which was a badass idea, but two artists trying to run that was not a good idea, because it's way different concepts of it's more hippie like mentality than business structure.
Exactly. Which they probably saw a little bit of the taste of what the things that pissed them off that we were trying to do to them or with them, and then Sissel ended up taking the job with Gary and going to work out of there, and then that's when I came back to Other Side Customs, and it was another awesome situation. Now I'm an airbrush guy. I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I got to go sit in a room and do gas tanks next to him and get him to show me what I'm doing wrong. How can I do this better? How can I do, and I owe a lot of my success to the people that I got to sit next to while I was doing it, because I didn't get that opportunity that much. For sure.
But then when you do, if you're in the right mind state, you can really capitalize off of it, because you realize, holy shit, this dude's so much more advanced.
Yeah.
So sometimes, just getting his input is awesome. And he used to tell me stories, and they were just fun to listen to while we were sitting there working, you know what I mean?
Dude, we used to say, it was back before a lot of the reality shows, and we used to say, man, if we could only just put cameras in here. If we knew then, knew then what we know now, we should have. But we used to always say, if we could just put cameras in here, it would be the best TV show ever.
Yeah,
if you could get it anywhere.
That's what we also say.
By the time you bleep out everything and blur out, dude, it was crazy.
Well, just the concept, man. Like sitting here thinking about talking to you and thinking about those times, like, yeah, me and Gary's got our differences, but man, like I really miss that. I miss going to work every day and being around other people that were passionate about custom paint and bikes.
Was John there?
Yeah,
Gay John?
Little Gay John. Yeah. Dude, that's the only dude I've ever wanted to fight so fucking hardcore in my life. So this is, dude. That. So the dude, you know him.
Oh, yeah.
People on here don't know him, but this dude's gay as fuck, right? And he's
like
cool as shit.
Really gay.
Yeah, like
literally.
Flaming. Not flaming like he dresses crazy, but just... he'll check your butt out and shit when you walk by, but he worked in a paint shop with a whole bunch of dudes, and it was just he was a good thing to have there. But
I still find it funny that he still works with Gary.
Yeah, he still works there. He used to go.
If you ever told me two people would work together, those two, I would never have said that or thought that.
But one day he was going hard on me, and I was getting butt hurt, and I ended up kind of bucking up to him, and he bucked up back to me.
Yep.
And I was like, I wasn't worried about not beating this dude's ass, but what I realized as I'm sitting here ready to swing on him was like, all right, I'm gonna beat this gay dude up, and then I'm gonna be the guy that beat a gay guy up, right. Or I'm gonna lose, and I'm gonna be the guy that got beat up by a gay guy, and I don't know which one's worse.
Yeah, there's no win.
So I had to just walk away.
Dude, we had there's some crazy people, stories, everything. It was good times for sure, and you had to, because we were, like I said, again, you got creative people stuck in it was a creative environment in our little circle, which was also funny because the paint shop, to get to the paint shop at Iron Horse, you had to walk through the front. So you had to go through the machine shop, the assembly line, all of that. Mm-hmm. And so you got your kind of traditional mechanic guys, and the cooler ones, Garley and those guys, they were off in a different room in like the R&D area. So, but you got your standard kind of gearhead guys, and all of our younger, crazier, crazy hair, crazy dress, gay John, whatever, would walk through. And it was funny. You just see those dudes just shaking their head with every morning, when we'd leave, or our guys would walk through, either coming to the paint shop or out. Just those guys would just roll their eyes and shake their head. They could not believe the shit walking through their shop.
Exactly. Well, it was crazy. Like I said, man, it really just boils back down to it of, if you ever get I guess that's the thing with me, is like I've had a hard time finding people that have the passion for the custom paint by themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like a lot of people nowadays, they are only looking at the dollar of what they can make, and this job doesn't pay enough. Like, dude, I started working for Gary for $250 a week. 2 years later, I was making $350.
Yeah.
4 years later, I was an airbrush guy, and I was making $600 a week. It's like it grow. You step up, and then eventually you got a bag of skills, that you can either, continue to do the custom paint or this, or, custom paint's not popular anymore. I can buff the shit out of cars.
Yeah, right.
I can paint, I can clear, I can body work, I can do all these different things. I can vinyl cut, I can run a sign shop.
Absolutely.
I mean, you just kind of like, you start looking at yourself like a way of like, how many skills can I acquire?
Yeah.
And then figure out, okay, well, this isn't working anymore. Maybe I can acquire this skill down this path.
Sure. Yeah. And I think if you have and that's what we used at Iron Horse a lot too, was if somebody was able to learn one task and has the drive to want to learn, mm-hmm. and the ability to learn it and master it, or at least get really good at it, then we could, we had confidence, and it's worth spending the time because they're going to get the next task too. So we had a lot of people that started out just cutting tape. Mm-hmm. And even that, as simple as it sounds,
there's an art to that.
Yeah, there is. I can't tell you how many times it's like, dude, when you saw sparks flying off the razor blade, wasn't that a good sign to stop? It's like they cut through everything and just engrave it. I mean,
there's a reason why. Like I've noticed that some people I've tried to help with my brother when he work. It's like, dude, get a new razor blade. That one clearly doesn't cut anymore. If you just went through it 3 times and it still didn't cut.
I used to.
The worst one was when you have mask off stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, for every triangle I see after I paint this, that's $10 off your check. You know, and it's like
Right.
there's 14 triangles on
Yeah,
the bike
right.
because they didn't tape it off correctly.
The cutting through, I used to show people, and they would.
What's your best method for cutting through?
I'd put a piece of 2-inch tape on my wrist.
Uh-huh.
I'd take just a single-sided razor blade and pull it along my wrist and pull up the other side. And I'd tell them, when you can do that, you can cut on my parts.
Wow.
So it's not necessarily OSHA approved, but
That's a good one.
but that's, I mean, if you got that depth, it's really just party trick. I
Yeah.
mean, you can feel the blade coming through, so it's not as gnarly as it sounds, but it looks scary as hell.
Yeah.
It gets the point across. But I mean, we use single-sided razor blades, cutting.
So
you know,
y'all
2-inch,
were y'all
3M
doing
tape.
more X-Acto knives, or
You know what? When I
learned the fucking.
I liked an X-Acto knife, but then Jeff always used a flat blade. So when we joined forces, I eventually ran out of X-Acto blades, and there were only single-sided razor blades. So I just started doing that, and we did it long enough. You can freehand cut a set of flames,
Yeah,
or
for sure.
whatever. You know,
You learn how to-
It's the same as pulling a
pinstripe.
striping, sword brush. So it's.
See, I still fuck up every once in a while myself when I'm cutting graphics. I won't be paying attention, and I'll go too deep, and I'm
Sure.
always like, fuck. Especially like when you cut something off, and you're like, okay, this didn't work. So now I'm
Yeah.
like, now I got to cut, and I got to sand this out and rebase it a little bit.
If it's the exception, that's okay, man. We had some dudes, boy, you unmask the whole thing, and it's the 16th inch fine line is literally cut in half all the way around it.
Could you imagine
Dude.
running that same shop at this day and age with every painter that works in there, and their Instagrams and their Facebooks and their egos and
Yeah,
I know I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd work.
No, it'd be. I don't know. I guess the challenges just be different. Some ways.
Well, that's
it'd be
why
easy.
you think about that, like because I remember Area 5150 was a big shop. You know, that was one of the places you see in a magazine every time you'd open up his
Yep.
big old page ad. And the dude called me once asking me to come out there back in like 2008. But this was after the chopper craze, and
Yeah.
he had downsized from like all these artists and all these
Yeah.
people and all these booths to one paint booth, and he just needed one artist, and and that was kind of like then. It never panned out, but it was just like that. All that stuff. I mean, didn't Mike Learn? You know who Mike Learn is, right? Didn't he work for Dino's for a while?
Yeah, I think
You
so.
know?
I think you're right. Yeah.
So a lot of people
he
get
does
that-
a lot of guitars and stuff.
Yeah,
now
he's
too.
big in the
Yeah.
guitar world. He's a good friend of mine. I'm gonna have him on here at one point in time. So
He does good work for
Yeah.
sure.
he's a big inspiration to me growing up. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, all those guys, they change. I feel like it was him and probably Lovelly and a few of theirs. That's when it really kind of evolved into more photorealism type things. I think they were on the brink of making that stuff happen. Where
I mean,
and maybe it was just me. I mean, I was really drawn more to the older, Ed Roth.
Yeah.
Vonda, the brush stuff and the Rat Fink style, brush stuff.
Well,
That
there was
stuff really intrigued me.
in the 80s and 90s. Just from looking at magazines and stuff, that the style of artwork was much more loose. Because when I first started working with Gary, there was an airbrush artist named Sal there that he was a phenomenal. Like he could run through a whole bike, And this is back in the days when people would airbrush the entire chopper, right?
Yeah.
And then they have a flame job over it or some shit. It wasn't like
Yeah.
just doing. Now I couldn't imagine the level of airbrush work that we have to do nowadays. There's no way I could pull it off in a reasonable amount of time. But so the airbrush was much more loose. It had a much more of a t-shirt look.
Yeah.
Like a real loose, like obviously drawn.
Yep.
And then as more artists found a way to make money in it, people that had a bigger appreciation for art. Like I love airbrush, but my buddy Ryan Townsend loves fucking art more than any specific medium. So he's applying skills that are from different areas into this, which has evolved and made the art scene more complicated and more. It's the same thing that's happening in an airbrush.
Yep.
Like we were talking about the leaf a while ago.
Yeah.
Back when you were doing it, you were telling me how you were with paper towels. I did the paper towel thing too for a while.
With the tissue between the layers of leaf or
and
whatever.
then the velvet and this, and
Yeah.
now we're using fucking sandpaper, and it's perfect.
Yeah.
I
think the materials, and especially silver leaf, because I think back then it was probably a lot of aluminum and things.
Yeah,
It was harder to turn. Where now I think you've got thinner and better materials that I think if you try to use some of those materials
Yeah.
nowadays, it just tear it all to hell. And I don't know. Are you turning it when it's still wet, or do you?
No, well, I mean,
do you do it when it squeaks? You do the squeak deal. Yeah. So,
but there's still a window, man. Like,
yeah, for sure.
I was doing it all with 3,000 grit just until like a couple of weeks ago, and then I switched to 5,000, and I started going through less because I would sometimes go through, and then I'd have to clear it, and then come back, and
I did one of the bikes I did at Iron Horse is one of our one-off deals, and it was actually one of the ones that we're talking about that was in a magazine. That it was a complete layer of turned silver leaf flames, and that one was hard from the standpoint of because you got to shoot the open area of flame and unmask it so that you can get a decently clean edge.
Yeah.
And get the leaf laid before and stay in that window. I mean, it's a tight window, and if you try to reduce it to spray it in that window goes even faster.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've always wondered about like doing like you see those big jobs like that, and you wonder the clear adhesion to the leaf. Like, how were they getting? Were they just bulldogging the shit or what?
I always used an adhesion promoter. I didn't use Bulldog brand, but we'd use like the Spies or the DuPont adhesion promoter. Same thing, like in the helmet world, we would and of course it's a smaller area, but if I did somebody that was had a Shoei or a Bell sponsorship, and we had to use, and we didn't have the vinyl to be able to reproduce the logo in paint like I would do now. We had to use the actual decal, and we do the same thing as use adhesion promoter. But it would literally, of course, as with everything back then, you learn the hard way, and I've peeled a lot of clear off of gold leaf and silver leaf, learning that you gotta adhesion promote it.
and it's always weird too, because when it peels off, the leaf goes with it.
Yeah, right.
But it's like
and there's still some left.
Yeah, right? There's still some left.
Apart in half.
It's like, what the fuck?
But same thing. And do you ever use neon colors?
Man, I'm probably the biggest asshole when it comes to stuff nowadays, because when you remember that paint company that came out that was making all that, like, you touch it and it changes colors and the wind blows, or the hot water.
Alsa.
All right. So when Alsa came out, that was, I think they were the OGs of the what's the word I'm looking for? The gimmick paint. Right.
Yeah. Well, they had a lot of it for sure.
And then, of course, YouTube and people got remote controls that change colors, and then Illuminor came out, and all these things. And I'm like, you know what, man? Like, I guess I'm just too old, but I think that if I need something like that to gimmick my paintwork to make it appealing to somebody, then my paintwork's not good enough.
Yeah, no, I'm just like the neon, like neon red or neon green, or just the bright colors, not the actual lit up stuff. Anyway, that stuff you had to.
I'm not good enough like painter to paint that shit, because you use a white base, and that color is like damn near candy.
Yeah, it's the same as shooting a candy. It's transparent.
And you I'd always,
And we found
and it faded
fishing
quick.
lure. Well, like the House of Color stuff and some of the other brands would all fade a lot. But we found a fishing lure paint from a company out of Chicago, and that stuff was really light, fast, and durable. Like it, you could leave it out. Especially in the motocross days, a helmet would come back that you need to repair or whatever in, and you could see if it had neon on it, because back then in the 80s, those colors were real popular, but you could see right where the visor was, where the sun did. Well, then once we went to that lure paint, it'd withstand. You wouldn't see the visor line on those very long at all. But anyway, that stuff, it was real chalky and stuff too, but you had to use adhesion promoter on it. You had to first spray it where it was wet enough that it would lay down and not dry spray. If it dry sprayed, nothing you could do to get it to do, where like standard solvent base coat, you could eventually get clear to level out over it. But with the neons, it's just like little balls that would just come off. You're screwed. You had to lay it flat. But that had to be, you had to use adhesion promoter on that stuff too.
I've never even done marbleizer, ever.
Really?
And not one paint job. I know how to do it, but I've never used it, and I've seen it starting to come back in a way that I actually want to try it now.
That's I've probably got some buddies that, if they're listening to this, is dying laughing that there's a period of time that I got accused of putting marbleizer on everything, marbleizer and checkered flags. Everybody,
dude, I had
shit
there was a joke going around town of me. It was always tribal flames and skulls.
Right. So it's. Yeah, no, there's definitely some things with the marbleizer. I mean, there's some little tricks, stuff that you can do to make it. Because, again, that was the other thing, and the other I guess we got good at a lot of different things at Iron Horse just based on things we had to deal with there. But if you did different parts, they all had to look alike, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had to, even times that we did Marbleizer, we had come up with a technique so it'd look the same every time. Because, you get one area heavier than another, and then you got wrinkles in part of the cellophane in some areas, but flat in others. Then you put two different parts together and they don't look like they go together. So we came up with, we got had to do procedures and write them. It was crazy the stuff we did there. It's, at one time we were trying to get ISO certified, like for the manufacturing plant, which you have to do that. You have to have every process has to be written. Mm-hmm. So imagine trying to write out the process of how to do a custom paint job and all the different ones. It ended up taking, when we first told the paint company, they're like, oh, yeah, we got people that can help you with that. They'll come out, spend a day or two with you, and you'll be good to go. Dude, we were 6 months, 8 months, forever, because it had to be very detailed and all that. So anyway, we ended up having to, and for the training piece of it, bringing in new people or promoting, from one department to the other, we produced manuals and different things to get people started. So made you kind of think a little bit differently and try to get your processes the same every time. Mm-hmm. We created, I feel like, of course it is different than collision or whatever, but I feel like we produced some pretty good painters because of that aspect. All the sheet metal, if you're doing candy or a lot of the colors, like you said, that even though they're not candy, you got to spray them consistent and clean. And then, so all the sheet metal's got to match. So it'd be the equivalent of in the collision world doing a panel match every single day on every single job. And then we did, so early on, we were running Daytech chassis and they were coming in powder coated. So we were matching the liquid paint to the powder. Mm-hmm. And between having our hands tied on what colors we could use, that we could only use base colors that they had in powder. Mm-hmm. So that limited our palette a little bit. And then once we got big enough, by the time you're doing 5 a day or whatever, that puts a lot of demands on all your suppliers, not just the paint department. So scheduling. So you had to have a customer and or a bike, the whole order, work order placed months in advance, because you had to you had to know what size engine you were putting in it to get the engine parts from S&S. Mm-hmm. You had to know exactly what color it was, because Daytech had to, when they made the chassis, they'd have to powder coat it that color. So then if you had any changes, whether the customer changed it or you needed to put a different bike in line for whatever reason, it'd screw everything up because it wouldn't be here. It had to be done months in advance. So we eventually scrapped powder coating the frames and went to liquid paints and put in a frame department. So we separated it. It was at the complete opposite end.
I would hate to work in that department, painting frames all day.
I want to say Gay John did some, I want to say he was painting. That dude.
He can paint. He can spot in too. He can
He was our main touch-up guy.
Yeah, he could touch up.
And I think some of the things that maybe were issues in other parts of life for him made him focus really, really good on that stuff. And he was badass at a lot of things. I want to say he was one of our better guys. That could be revisioned history, but anyway, so what would happen is, because those booths are complete opposite end of the building, whole different crew, and we had 3-4 different candy colors, and metallic to some point will do, play tricks, or get the fly, if you don't lay it down good and clean, then your side tone's going to look different or what have you. So that was really like doing a panel match, because those we were painting weeks in advance, sometimes not so much, and then they go into the warehouse, and then they had to meet up with sheet metal on the assembly line that we were painting with completely different people. Yeah. Couple weeks or a month later, and it had to match. You had parts that literally were touching. Yeah. So it was even closer than panel match, I guess, in collision world. And some of those guys were hadn't even painted before. And I don't know, they probably might not, they could paint a round double tubed frame flawless, and may not be able to paint a car.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely areas. I think you could probably candy that a little bit easier than a car, or 100% easier than a car. But man, just the getting a consistent clear coat on all those.
And candy too. When you're doing one down tube, you're getting some overspray on the other one.
Yeah.
And then trying to come around, so some things are getting, where
You'll
you
get
got
a
4
big dry
tubes
spot
come
in the
into
middle.
one spot. Yeah, you're quad coating one area, around the neck or whatever. So it definitely took a lot of skill. And we had having a machine shop and a welding department and all of that in-house, we had some luxuries too. So we had rotisserie frames, that would perfectly fit the jigs and rotate around. So, some of those guys, when they're figuring stuff out, well, stuff happens, but you start to see clear getting heavy on one end of it. You just rotate that sucker upside down and let it run the other way.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, doing helmets, got hooks in the booth or whatever. You might have to hang a helmet occasionally.
So what was it like when Iron Horse finally was like done? Like, what was your process? Did you go into the sales of paint manufacturer stuff?
No, actually, so there were 2. So after the first, I don't know if it was officially bankruptcy, but anyway, the first time it shut down, got rid of everybody. We had the guy that ended up buying it for the second go round was already around and showing his face. So he had mentioned, hey, I want to bring you back. We're going to try to make another run at it. So I held off as long as I could. So I still had customers. We had dealers that were out. We had a pretty big dealer network, and I was the one that they were speaking to more times than not when, to either order their paint, at the dealer shows, or talking about new stuff each year. And during the whole process, I was kind of that point of contact. So I knew dealers all over the country back then. So I had people, sometimes it was warranty work, somebody made a modification to a fender or whatever. So anyway, 6 months, 8 months, whatever it was for the new guy to get everything in order and for us to open the doors back up. I was able to stay afloat just doing essentially side work and or keeping those guys alive. Then we made another run at it. And then at that time, actually I brought Michael Keaton came back for part of that because he was flexible and could do, he could still, pinstripe and airbrush a little bit and lay out and spray. So between he and I, and Jeff was already kind of moved up and he was helping kind of run the company.
Yeah, so I remember he was kind of up in the front. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the meat of things, he left the paint shop kind of midway through and took over the role of design of the whole thing. So he was more involved in the shape of the parts and the wheels and everything ground up on that side of things, where I stayed in the paint shop and doing that. So he stayed up front on the relaunch, and Michael and I, and actually, Tim Murphy, he's been at Gary's.
He works at Gary's now,
Yeah. He would come here and there. He was doing his own thing still, so he did a few things for us. And his style, he's developed a lot too. He's always pretty good when he came to us.
Mike every day.
Yeah.
And I've just because when he first started coming around Gary's shop, I was still working there, but I had started building bikes a lot, so I was like building sport bikes and putting big tire kits on them and all that shit out of Gary's shop. And then I kind of had my own business I was running out of his shop. Sure. And then so he brought Tim along to start doing what I kind of stopped doing, and then I went my own way. So we relaunched. Tim was around a little bit. Michael and I were painting pretty much any of the bikes that got produced on that second go round. And that deal lasted right at about a year. And then when it tanked, I thought, that this is it. Gonna make another run. Still had the dealer connections, and so I tried to make another run at my own shop. So one of our guys, he's actually, where did he go? He went to, shop out in Florida. He left Iron Horse for a little bit, came back. Anyway, great airbrush artist, Kevin Howard. So he helped us design a lot of stuff later. He worked for Jeff, when he was real young, so all the time he was learning and becoming a airbrush artist. He worked at Jeff's
shop before Iron Horse, and he worked with us at Iron Horse, and turned into be a great airbrush. He's a great artist all the way around. He could pinstripe, airbrush, illustrate, everything. So while in between gigs, he had kind of established doing a lot of T-shirt art. And after the second Iron Horse tanking, I grabbed him, and we started a shop where trying to rely on, again, our dealer network of, for motorcycle stuff, jump back into the helmet game a little bit, and then he had started doing a lot of T-shirt illustrating and stuff like that.
This brings me back to a big question. There was around that time, and I'm sorry if you're a part of this, because we were all I was working in Gary's at the time, Shark Custom Paint or something like that. It was some big thing where it had like 5 owners, and none of them were painters, and it was out of Fort Worth somewhere.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
now you say it, and a couple of our guys, guys went there, but they were some of the guys that were not. They weren't like the main painters.
Yeah, so there was like a business idea, like, and I'm like 24.
I
I'm
totally
like,
forgot about that.
I'm like, how the fuck are 5 people that don't do anything?
They sunk a lot of cash into that too,
and it didn't last. And it didn't last nowhere.
Well, and all the stuff they're doing, they're putting their money and efforts behind guys that weren't really custom painters.
Yeah.
They, again, like I was talking about earlier, you run into people, hey, I got screwed. This guy said he was painted at Iron Horse or whatever. And then you hear his name, and it turns out he was like masking and sanding, or something like that.
Dude, when Iron Horse tanked, man, like Dallas Fort Worth was saturated with custom paint shops for a while.
Yeah.
And it took a while for everybody to kind of disperse and when you don't
have to pay the overhead, custom paint looks easy.
Exactly.
And it was easy if you're like under our roof, because it's the reason I went originally. So
that's almost like you have to, working at a place like that, you're painting for money, but you're not painting for money. You're not painting with the headaches over your head of running the business, so you're able to focus more on the artwork.
For sure.
And that's kind of the reason why I felt like it was good for me doing this at a young age, because I had less responsibility
for sure
to overshadow what I need to be doing. So
I was the same deal.
If I had to learn this shit now, there's no fucking way.
Right. Yeah, no. Same thing. When I started and was doing helmets, I was just starting to go to college, and probably no bills.
Yeah.
So then it's easy. You can do stuff cheap, but then same thing. And that was part of the problem of relaunching after Iron Horse was, now you've got, kids, a house, all these other responsibilities. So you can't have low, you can't go through, you can't weather the storm on the bad months. And also, too, the other thing is, part of what caused Iron Horse to fail at the second time is that industry, that area of the industry was dying. So that also meant so was the dealer network that I had. So a lot of the people that I went in thinking we're going to be customers, they also sort of died. And being at Iron Horse for 11 years, my name pretty much disappeared from the game for a while,
Yeah.
So it was almost like starting completely over, which, some of that stuff I expected, some of it I probably didn't anticipate very well. And then Kevin basically went in as a business partner, and he had his own challenges of life during that time. So, and then he ended up leaving, maybe 6-8 months into it. And then actually Carl helped me out a lot back then, doing we split a lot of stuff. Started doing a lot of the Mini Cooper roofs for Moritz, did a bunch
British
of those things.
I
did 3D British flag, tie-dye. I did some Affliction looking stuff. We did some cool stuff, but then again, it's back to hustling though, It's like just doing whatever you could to generate income, and then.
But looking at this brochure, I guess you don't see as much anymore.
Right. That was before the internet was going strong.
But looking at this brochure, I remember a lot of these styles of paint jobs. I remember how, like detailed and wild all this shit had to be. And it's like, when I tell people that kind of glock and glamour over the panel stuff that we do nowadays. Yeah. And I'm like, this shit is nothing compared to the shit we used to have to do back in the day that would get overlooked. So not commonly, but it nowadays people will look back at that aren't, and they'll be like, oh, that looks like something you see on an Affliction t-shirt. I'm like, fucking paint an Affliction t-shirt. That shit is hard.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot. I don't condone people wearing it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
good point.
definitely a very complicated paint job to pull off. And
A lot of layers.
yeah. And so like when the panel thing came along, like I was telling you before, I was like, man, that's it, not that it was beneath me.
Yeah.
But I was like, that's too simplistic
Sure.
for me to pursue. Like, I don't think it's going to stick. And now here we are fucking,
Yeah,
you know,
man.
I'm only been doing it for 2 years now, but you know, this shit started getting popular back in like 2012.
Yeah.
You know?
But I mean, I think it's a lot like some other aspects of custom paint that if it looks simple or easy, sometimes that makes it even harder because you can tell. Like, for instance, you mentioned, what'd you call it? The scratch striping or whatever.
The
that
razor striping.
Yeah. You can tell when somebody who knows how to pinstripe does that, and
Yeah.
when somebody is doing that because they don't know how to pinstripe.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks completely different. You know, if you're just using it as an excuse because you don't know how to. I think same thing with panels.
Yeah.
Like, just because it looks simple, you can tell if somebody
Exactly.
doesn't know to have an eye for balance or art or,
So-
you know, panels flow even though
Yeah, they do.
don't.
That's what I try to do with my shit.
Yeah.
But since you've been in the paint game for a long time, like how the styles and trends of changing, like how have you kind of adapted through it? I mean, I know that a lot of people that have been painting for the last 5 years or even 10 years haven't seen a style change. They've only been kind of evolved into like a small window of different styles. Like they, you know, like we've been, and I say that we've been in a pinstripers market for the last 10 years as opposed to an airbrushers market.
Right, yeah.
And
I
the
see that.
2000s was more of an airbrushers market.
Man, honestly, probably because I feel like I'm not all that great at any of it. You know what I mean? Like I could never sit down and airbrush something to Mike Sissel's degree or whatever. So I've always just tried to be better than average or really good, but not, I guess, a master at all the different categories for that reason, because it changes and fluctuates and all that, and that's probably allowed me to change styles too, as the trends or the markets, and it's not even copying paint. I mean, clothing. I mean, you see it.
You see it in a lot of things.
Yeah, everything. I mean,
Yeah,
back
because-
when we first started, mini trucks, all that stuff was, the clothing matched the dumb stuff we were doing back then. It's
Well, I've been talking to a lot of friends, and I feel like the two things that I see resurgent, like coming back to surface. I'm not even gonna try that word right now. Even though flame jobs, like just traditional flames, never really go away, they do have their rise and plateau and peaks and valleys, and I feel like they're starting to kind of make a comeback, and it's really fun to look at. Now, I'm not talking about the chopper crab claws of the unskilled flame. I'm talking about a nice, good flame job that people that have real talent,
balanced bulb
or real skill, I guess you'd say.
The bulb in the middle of the flame.
Yeah.
There's a lot of.
And then that mini truck shit, I feel like is coming back with the flavor in the panel market. So like the panels, but with the color combinations of what you would see in that the late 80s, early 90s kind of mini
The
trucks.
neon
But
stuff.
going back to helmets, though, like most people know I've never liked painting helmets, but it was because, and I know I've said this a lot of times, so I apologize for people that's heard it before, but it's because I could never get paid to do helmets, at what I need to be paid to do that much work. It is not a bike and it is not a car, but for some reason it still is a lot of work. And so now, when I found a niche in doing the helmets the way that I do them, it's made it to where I can get the money that I need to do them to make a living off of it, but also get rid of some of the headaches like we were talking about before of like worrying about shit. Like, because otherwise, if I'm only getting $500 to paint a helmet, that shit ain't paying nothing in my shop, and I can't spend that much time on it. So when you start making X amount of dollars to do a helmet and it pays for your time during the week, dude, I've never been able to spend a week on a helmet, and I'm this close to be able to do that. And when I do, I'm excited to see what I can come up with that kind of creativity, freedom time frame. Now, the other thing that I was getting at here is that, I've got a friend in the paint helmet game, Austin Poland. I've talked about him almost every podcast, I think the last couple of times, but he's one of my favorites. And he was my introduction into that style. Like, I started following him, and I kind of started seeing that race style helmet. And then you see the Indocile dude and all these other people, and you realize that it's a whole market of people with that similar style of helmets.
Yes. Brett King.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Super clean.
So it's like, I mean, not to discredit them because I'm super fascinated with that whole style right now, but I wonder how they eat out of the same pot with all of them kind of being similar. And I mean, you could see a difference between some of them that the skill set isn't quite there yet.
Right.
Like I would say the Indosso dude and my boy Poland are probably, in my eyes, the top dudes. Of just cleanliness and versatility in their styles and bringing in shit. But I've also seen
definitely
some dudes that
the versatility.
Yeah.
Because you see some looser things incorporated into theirs, where like the Brett King or the Sinsport or some of the other.
See, I don't know them. They might be exactly there. They might have.
It's all super clean stuff. We totally appreciate. It's really clean. More panel and layers and things like that. But just airbrush faded lines and clean lines and things like that. And the paint job overall is very clean and simple looking, where like Poland or Indosil or however you pronounce it, they're incorporating more of the looser, more versatile type of things in my eyes. So I can see what you're saying.
They have a sense of flow, which is my most favorite part of a paint job, is the flow of it.
Yep.
And they do things on some of their paint jobs that are completely ass backwards from the way there's traditionally you're supposed to do it.
Yeah, right.
And but still creates a sense of flow. So to me, that's real art, in my opinion. It's going against the grain of the way we normally see things to be flowing, and it still creates that sense.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
But it is fascinating to me. Like, I went down a YouTube hole a couple of days ago, like just YouTube and Pinterest, actually.
Okay.
Just looking at all these different helmets and fascinated by the color choices and the color combinations and the little tricks they do. And basically, I'm sick and tired of lace and water drops and fucking, what else am I? Fish scales.
All the things that are on their second or third generation.
Yeah, it's definitely it's nothing new, but I'm just over it.
Yeah.
And I want to find new things to make subtly in paint jobs that can make me feel like I'm evolving, because I feel like I'm evolving in my style. But when you're doing your fish scale for this quarter, you're just kind of feeling a little compartmentalized, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And, I mean, and a lot of times we'd kind of run into that going back to the Iron Horse days. We had to come up with new stuff every single year, and then as we had more people that could contribute or whatever, we'd throw out all kinds of different things. But a lot of times we'd end up sort of combining two or three things. Like I could see your stuff evolving into where you're incorporating, where you're maybe still doing the panels, but then some of that more intricate airbrush stuff that you're capable of inside some of the panels, just in different pieces and stuff like that. And that it also puts you in a place where it's not as easy to duplicate, puts you in a different, I think, market or category too.
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm really trying to do right now is I'm since I am so fascinated with the race helmet kind of style, is I want to evolve that into my style, or I want to add elements of that into my paint jobs. So, and it's not so much for the helmet paint, it's for the bikes. Like, I want to bring that into the bike culture, and it's really hard to translate it because of...
Dude, if you look back at the... not to interrupt, if you look back at the very first Iron Horse paint jobs that Jeff and I did, and then together doing it, and then you looked at the helmets and the style of stuff back then, you totally could see the connection. And it was very different than what motorcycle or Harley painters were doing back then. I mean, it's down to colors, pulling in some of the neons and stuff back then, and things that did look like they were fighting the shapes of the parts a little bit as far as angles and flow goes. But it if you looked at the helmets we were doing back then, it all looks a lot alike. But it was in an area or a new arena, that where people hadn't seen it, and it was kind of new for a change. And
but I guess it's also, for me as well, it's looking at it more of a, as you kind of like paint in different eras and learn different, techniques and styles, and, you get to it. Like, I'm at a point where, like, I want to go hang out with one of these helmet painters and just hang out with them for a weekend while they're doing some work, and just kind of like see it, see like try to. I don't need to ask them questions. I can just watch and just,
yeah, for sure,
and do that and just see how they're kind of flowing and how their mind works with that shit.
You know what I think? What I feel anyway that causes their stuff to be the way it is from what I can gather, just sort of lurking and creeping on Instagram or, you know, whatever social media is. I think a lot of that stuff is designed on the computer as opposed to being either hand drawn or done on the helmet itself.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of stuff back, you know, when I was doing a lot of helmets, a lot of it was done on the spot, on the helmet, fitting the shape, because it was hard to translate what was happening on that flat paper to the shape of the helmet. And or you explain that to customers when they try to give you an idea, you know, hey, this is going to look much different when we take your flat chicken scratch and turn it into a round object. So you kind of set the grounds then. But if you look at some of the posts that they're doing of like pre-painted design, and I know Jeff started doing a lot of it to get that same style, because he was most recently in the race helmet paint game, and he started having to do the same thing, but they're designing everything on the computer, Photoshop, whatever programs, Illustrator. They're laying it all out. So it's all starting as a two-dimensional rendering. And then when you look at, so if you looked at like the pencil sketches we were doing way back compared to the finished product, I feel like they looked a lot different. Yeah. Where now, if you look at, to me anyway, if you look at those computer, you know, or they're illustrating them, but on the computer or whatever, they look a lot like the finished product. They're making the helmet match that two-dimensional object a lot. Yeah. It's good. I like it and can totally appreciate it, but it is much different. Yeah. I don't think I've ever broken it down quite like you did, but it's, well, it's just, I mean, that's it's just right. You know, finding like you have to constantly evolve. Like I said, from my market standpoint, you know, if I think it's a bad business decision to just assume that things are going to stay the same and keep just not adding skills to the tool or tools to the tool chest. You know? Well, and history shows you that it's going to always evolve or change. And it does show you that. But the cooler part about it is that as they do change and as you add more styles to your belt, you know, you can always whip out something else from, you know, that we used to do 4 years ago and throw it in that people are like, whoa, I've never seen nothing like that. And it's so quick how things get forgotten, you know? Oh, yeah. You totally. Know, because paint jobs are, you know, even though they're very expensive and they, you know, labor intensive, they, you know, there's only a handful of bikes and handful of cars in history that we remember paint job wise, you know? Yeah. Which is, you know, kind of insane to think about, considering like I could probably in my head say some of the best paint jobs I can remember from my favorite artists, but you know, it's not a popular thing. It's not like there's a Hall of Fame for us custom painters, right. You know what I mean? Totally. So it's a weird thing, man, but that I see that a lot. I see a lot of people, and you see that in shops. Man, I saw that in the mid to late 2000s when I was working with Gary, and I realized that the whole photo album was all this 90s shit. Yeah, right. And I was like, man, like they're doing real fire now. We need to be stepping it up, you know, and they're doing this and they're doing that. And then you see that evolve now. And now I see other painters who only have that 2000s vibe and they haven't evolved into what's kind of more popular now. We did a lot of, and somebody who I felt like was really good at it for a while was Joe Martin. Yeah. Like he had Mini Truck and a couple other things like that where it was incorporating characters or cartooning type of things with graphics. You know, that was a whole other thing. And of course it was much different and it was more like a Lucky Strike guy. It was more of a hand brush look and stuff. That was the type of stuff that I was always drawn to. Whereas, you know, and then of course it evolved into more of as materials and people have gotten better as far as the photorealism type stuff. You know, I think the whole thing, you know, sort of went away from those sorts of the more cartoony hand brush looking stuff and more of the freehand photo. You know, things. Like the era of you and Iron Horse and kind of the era I came in the paint thing, it was very common for guys like us to be well-rounded in the paint game, from pinstriping, graphics, airbrush. Like almost everybody did everything. And then nowadays, I feel like a lot of people
there are a lot of people that do everything, but I feel like a lot of people that are masters in one area are not really good at other things.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Yeah, I see it in work that people are still doing, but lived it back in the Iron Horse days. And some of it, you know, people either they physically can't. You know, some of our very best airbrushers couldn't pull a clean line with a paintbrush, and vice versa, or they didn't have the interest. You know, you have the passion and the drive, and you're willing to spend all the time to become a good airbrusher. The idea of picking up a brush and learning, starting over, you know, a lot of people aren't willing to invest that time. Some of the guys, I mean, like, I think Sissel, even though he did a lot of airbrush stuff, I mean, he could still pinstripe. You know what I mean?
Really good.
If you got that hand-eye coordination, you know, it goes back to talking about Michael, you know, just the fact that he could play guitar so well. You know, I think if your brain works, you know, whether right, left side, whatever, and you got the hand-eye coordination to pull, you know, fine line or
I think it's repetition
brush.
As well. I mean, like
True.
doing things a lot, you get the hand-eye coordination, and then you start to.
Yeah.
I figured that's why, like, you know, I can stripe, but if you said, hey, man, here's a panel, pull me a design. I don't pull designs much. Those strokes I'm not used to. You ask me to outline some flames, or you ask me to outline some parts, I got that, you know. But it's just the fact, like,
it's a matter of time, though.
Yeah, it's just if I've been wanting to set time to kind of practice it, but so now you're working.
It doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah. So now you're with Axalta, which, like, I just found out today is it used to be DuPont, or is it just a form of DuPont now?
Yeah, no. So what it was is, okay, DuPont has chemical coatings. They're in a bunch of different arenas, carpet, you know, what have you. So DuPont wanted to unload. They didn't want to be in the automotive coatings business any longer. So they wanted to unload that division of the company. So they sold their automotive division, which included, you know, the Chroma line, Spieshecker.
I used to love spraying Premier Clear. Oh, man, it used to be some good shit.
It's a good product. Anyway, so when they did sell that off, they couldn't keep the oval logo and name, so they had to be renamed when they broke it off and sold it. So that's when it changed to Axalta.
So did Nason go with it, or is Nason still a DuPont? Because Nason was like always...
Yeah, anything in the automotive or industrial coatings is Axalta now. Okay. DuPont doesn't have anything to do with that. They're in different chemicals and other industries. So I did a 5-year stint with Sherwin-Williams after my shop, where it's more on the sales side of things. It's the same thing. We were talking about the difficulties of everything, and the industry changing, and the customer base changing, and still having, you know, more. I had 3 kids, you know, got overhead now, you know. So, and the thought, I mean, just getting older, and the passion too, you know, it's, like I was telling you earlier, now it's fun to paint again. Yeah. Where at that time it was no longer fun to paint. It's a challenge. It's a job, and you had to do it every day. So it wasn't quite as enjoyable. So all that combined made the decision that it probably needed to either scale way back and try to run a simpler gig without, you know, the t-shirts and all the other, you know, just lower overhead, or make a change altogether. And we made a lot of connections. You know, in the time at Iron Horse, we were a big shop. We bought a lot of materials, so we caught the eyes of a lot of people. I mean, like I was saying, we had months where we bought more than $100,000 in liquid alone. Yeah. So got to meet a lot of people with a lot of different companies that came through. So when it was time to kind of make a change or do something different, sort of reached out to people that either called on us or did business with back then, and actually interviewed and was very close to going to work at Sickens, just knew some of those guys. And that was right at the time or the point where Sickens and LKQ were merging and things were changing. So that ended up not panning out. And
how has the transition been from being a guy in the shop to becoming a guy behind the paint, not paint counter, but somewhat, you know?
Yeah, I got a funny story there. So we went, so I jumped, you know, changed sides of the fence, go to work there. And it's funny because even today, I'll guarantee you that hardly anybody that I deal with knows anything that I did before. I'm just some jerk off wearing clean shoes, and doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about, trying to tell them. But so it was early on. I was at Sherwin, and the guy that's sort of training me or showing me, my territory or whatever, we go in, and there's a guy under a car, his feet sticking out, and my buddies says, "Hey, I'm here to introduce your new paint rep to you." Blah, blah, blah. And he's got, typical grouchy painter deal. And like, oh, great. Let me guess, you've been painting for 20 years, and it's like, well, yeah, actually, I have. Great. Another painter that couldn't make it painting is going to come show us how to do it. And I was like, well, okay, fair enough. But actually, I think I just found a way to do it without getting as dirty as you are right now. And he sort of rolls out, and he's like, so, where'd you paint or whatever? I was like, American Iron Horse the most recently. And he's like, really? Check out my bike. I've got a bike in the parking lot I did flame jobs on. I told him, I was like, great, another collision guy wants to be a custom painter. So he stuck out his hand. He's like, we're going to get along just fine. So it's
a good one.
Just knowing the, being in the custom world and then evolving into that production environment. Early on, you're pushing the boundaries of the product, what it's designed to do. We're way overstacking it. You're doing stuff, especially earlier on, trying to get colors, keep your lines thin, all that good stuff. So you learned a lot by being in the middle of it, and then go into the production world. We had to start getting things structured and being able to warranty it and things like that. So I feel like that background really paved the way pretty well. And then, of course, my marketing and whatever on the business side through school and running a business and all that good stuff. So it was actually fairly easy because I felt like, and I'd run into, especially at SW, we'd run into, some of my counterparts maybe either came from college and they know a lot about the business side and going in and trying to sell something, but they've never been in a shop day to day and been able to paint. Or they came from the paint side and they know a lot about paint, but they're not that comfortable talking to customers or trying to sell a product, where I felt like for me, it was a good balance. I was still doing both aspects of it, just like when running a shop or at Iron Horse, where I'd spent half the day in the office talking to dealers, ordering paint or trying to help them choose paint for their customers. And then the other half out training painters and actually painting to get some production done or whatever needed. And then, so I did that for 5 years, and then had an opportunity, kind of ran its course. Had some good and bad experiences there, and then had the opportunity to come back to what is now Exalta, with Spies Hecker, which we pretty much the whole time at Iron Horse we used Spies Hecker. So it was like taking a big clean breath and like coming home, just to having a product that I knew, having people, all that. And anyway, I'm in I guess what they call the MSO division there. So we deal with bigger operations. Any of the shops that the group I'm in deals with are the more chains, the Service Kings, what was Craig's or whatever. And I specifically deal with just caliber collision. So my daily job is to be the conduit between the paint manufacturer and the collision center, and make sure that they're profitable. So some days that may be, is the painter overusing product or having a challenge where he's making mistakes and having to repaint something which uses too much product. So some days I'll be in the back of the shop helping painters kind of clean up what they're doing. And then in other days it may be from like the estimating or the management side. So where I'm dealing with managers. So really my background in both the paint and the business or book side of it has just continued to today. I mean, it's the same thing.
That's cool that it was able to transfer over,
Yeah. And same thing. Like I said, I feel like if you're too strong in the technical side, might not be as effective and the office side of it and vice versa. So it's been, like I tell people, or people that ask, how'd you end up in this place? It's like, well, very few people have made the ridiculous life decisions that I have to to actually know, both paint and the business side of it. There are some, of course, but in fact, Jeff's over at Exalta now too.
For real?
Yeah, so he's in a different division, an area, but he's over there.
I don't really know enough about this, but I got a lot of friends that still work in the collision industry. Mm-hmm. It's been, I worked for Service King for like a couple weeks, a long time ago.
Yeah, right.
A long time ago. But
yeah,
it seems like the service industry, the collision industry has like gotten to the point where there's just so much money, but so much money is getting paid out, it seems. Like I've seen people have estimates where the insurance companies they'll actually be working for nothing.
Yeah.
Because of hours of a quarter panel, deduct this, deduct that. Next thing you know, you're painting a whole car for 4 hours, and it's crazy shit and material costs. And
yeah, I think there's a couple of different mindsets or philosophies, I guess. So there's actually a whole, what do they call it? Auto Body Association of Texas, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's a whole group of smaller, more independent shops that are trying to band together and keep their prices and basically hold their ground against the insurance companies driving it. And then I think the bigger shops are, like the Service Kings or the Calibers or Abras or whatever. They're not fighting that battle quite as much. Like on each job, they're more trying to do it from bulk.
Yeah, it's like
so they're making the margins are less. They're making less per job, but they're doing a whole lot of them.
And the insurance companies are more prone to want to push them down that route because they're getting better deals and stuff. Which I don't want you to hurt your business or anything, but it's just like it does feel like a corporation pushing out a mom and pop shop 100%.
Oh, that's I think the way of the whole world, but the industry is definitely going that way. And in fact, when I was at Sherwin, we had a consultant that was his big thing was, we'd have him do these seminars for these shops, and he had been tracking some things that were happening in Europe or wherever and felt like our business model was kind of mirroring those others. And gosh, this was when I first went there. So we're probably 8 years ago or more. He was kind of predicting the way that it was going. He was saying, telling them, you got to lower your costs. The only way you're going to be competitive with where we see the industry going is being able to compete with those guys by lowering your costs, being more efficient, and all those things. And it's played out almost exactly like he was describing then.
But I would say that the paint industry, just the collision industry, is a big employer of people across America, right?
Which is tough at times, but
it's tough.
Young people aren't coming into the industry like they used to.
Well, I mean,
that's a lot
man.
of it.
It's like,
technicians are.
I think that too, but there was something cool about working in a shop a long time ago, but now it's corporate as fuck. Dude, I lasted 4 days at Service King or whatever.
I deal with it daily right now, and there's a couple ends of it. Is from the collision side, it's got to be corporate to run that way, and it is hard. Again, not as much so. They're not quite as creative, it's not artists, but they're still hands-on guys, and they struggle with that. And then a company like Caliber or Service King or any of those, that's why I'm there, is to try to help those guys clean up their stuff. You can't have any waste. You got to be productive. You got to use the product the way it's designed to, coat and a half, cover it. We are looking at and tracking costs from so many different angles. It's crazy. And then, like I was saying, like the end of the month, we're going around, we're trying to prevent them from overbuying, to help clean up their budgets and keep everything in line. And to a painter, he's like, hey, I just need everything. I need everything now, in case this car comes through or what have you. Yeah. So there's a natural struggle there, the corporate side trying to keep their costs low, and then a painter who's getting paid on commission who doesn't want to run out. You got to strike a balance there. And that's kind of where I come in, I guess, is to try to be that buffer to try to help the painter understand how to run his inventory and how to produce the hours and the time. And then we'll also dig into because so it is corporate, and you are trying to make money with volume. Like, I don't know the number of units because I don't deal with them every day with Service King, but Caliber, for instance, got over 620 locations. I mean, it's a huge corporation, and they've got, for them to be successful, they've got to watch their costs, and it's hard when you've got that many shops. So that's got vendors and people like us that have a vested interest in helping them to be profitable. That's what we're out, is trying to help those guys. So do
you have any insights on what you think would help the smaller guys is to be competitive? I mean, it seems like, like I was talking to you earlier, that people want to spend money, or not everybody, but it seems like a lot of us want to start buying and doing business with people that we feel like we know the owner, or we know the hand behind it.
In the collision world, I think the smaller shops, and again, since I'm not dealing with those daily, it could change now, but when I was dealing with those guys and what I see now, how things are done and how they need to be profitable, it's more, I think just managing costs. There's so much waste that smaller shops do because that's just what they know. They're over mixing, in a product now that doesn't, in the solvent days, you go into an old collision shop and you see all the pint cans stacked up of leftover product. Yeah, but your world's different because you're making your pallet. Yeah. Which same thing at Iron Horse. We had, 25 colors and used PPS cups, and you could just keep refilling them because we were determining the pallet. Whereas a collision shop, you don't know what color's coming in. The next day. You may get a run of pearl white Subarus or whatever, and then don't see another one for months. So you don't need product laying around. It's not the coverage. You just don't need it. They'll always say, well, I'm going to use it for ground coat. Well, you don't need ground coats anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a whole different mindset to be more of a lean, mean fighting machine, I guess. But also too, having guys that know what they're looking for to deal with the insurance companies. They're making the calls these days, and you got to work with them instead of fighting them sometimes. And not necessarily the big picture as much as, they're going to try to nickel and dime you I've seen shops that they let the adjuster write the estimate, and that's like asking the customer, how much do you want to pay? Yeah. And they just take it, or they don't even look over it, or whatever. They're not getting paid for a lot of the processes that they're doing. And it's sort of, and then if you do that long enough, then when you do start to try to ask for it again, they're like, well, we don't pay for that.
It's funny when you look at a really well-written estimate, and every nut and bolt, every chemical, every waste, everything's on there.
Tail light pockets.
Yeah, it's like I'd love to have like that kind of invoicing system, so that every text message I get, which I'm not opposed to that, but every phone call on a Sunday afternoon, and just all these different things, and running across town to get this color. It's like, oh man, it's like you could really nickel and dime the fuck out of everything you do.
Yeah, and customers don't understand that either. That eats up, on what we do with the custom stuff too. Yeah, you don't see all the other, having to chase down product, having to do the little bitty things just for daily activity.
I found myself, the only ruts I ever get in is creative ruts, and I guess now because like I'm getting to a level of my paint where everyone needs to be as good as the one before or better. Yeah. And so it's like a very high pressure every time you do something, because I feel like the audience keeps getting bigger, the pressure keeps getting bigger. Sure. And so, and for me, I've been keeping this mindset for the longest that I want to be impressed with everything I do that I put out. And, sometimes I get to a point, man, where I just like, I'm stumped.
That's something I learned from Dimebag, and it's a lot of the things. We'd have discussions that it's amazing how similar the music world and, the paint world were. But one thing, I'd go in, just sit in when they, he'd be recording or whatever. They'd be in the middle of doing an album, and I'd just sit in the studio with him, and he just cut the same thing over and over and over. And I'm like, dude, that's killer. He's like, no, it still doesn't. And he'd tell me like the mindset for him was, Eddie Van Halen or somebody that he looked up to. He wanted every song or every track to be something, if they listened to it, that they would appreciate what he was doing. So, I mean, it wasn't to try to make it perfect, or whatever, but it was something that somebody of his skill level or better or whatever would appreciate and could do. And that's what sort of drove him to do. And that's, I learned a bunch of things from that dude. That's goes back and forth, but right around the time, and it's funny because right time of going to Iron Horse was also the time their music was transitioning a little bit, and have discussions with him where, early on, a lot of their music was focused around his leads, and and whenever you heard about the band, his name was brought up, and he was kind of the the figure guy, and he made a conscious effort to take a step back, and not, I think it was around Vulgar album or so, he would try to blend, cut the leads down a little bit and try to make it more of a band or a group effort. And that was a very conscious deal that he said, I'm trying to make this less about me. And because I know that for us to go further and get to the next level and the next step, we got to do it together. And that's going to require me taking a step back. And that was about the time that I was kind of looking at and going through and struggling a little bit with, I'm no longer Duppstadt Graphics or whatever it is, now Iron Horse, and it kind of helped make that transition. That's cool. Those in too, it's because I could kind of see it and approach it that same way. It's like, okay, it's not an individual effort now; it's a group. So, and that also helped, whenever, if it was a bike, one of our guys did, or Jeff did primarily, or whatever. If it was a magazine, anything, if it had the Horsehead logo on it, I could take pride in it. Even though I maybe didn't do it, that was part of the process, so it helped change the mindset, but then also made it harder to go back to that single deal too. So, it's been a definite crazy ride and lots of ups and downs, but seen a lot of different changes for sure.
Yeah, the different industry, aspects. Man, it's an ever-evolving fucker, ain't it?
Yeah, and there's always different, things that'll pop up, and I've always tried to do some of the side stuff and stay going. And like I did a swimming pool for Vinnie Paul, and just like weird different things, new challenges you do, you got the daily grind, but you always try to incorporate some weird, new or different thing that you had to tackle, it wasn't, but I get it, getting in the rut and trying to branch out or do something new.
Well, what's been this year is that you do one, like just using helmets for example, you do one helmet that everybody fucking loves, right? And so you have to redesign a paint job off that helmet 10 times. Yeah. And then the other thing I started realizing too is like, I don't think my prices are high for my helmets in comparison to people that I look up to or that I feel like I'm on a skill level with, but I know that they're high for what the average person wants to pay for a helmet paint job, right? But I look at my designs and I put a lot of effort into coming up with them, even if they are all similar spins off of one. And I'm like, man, I would be hating myself if the job that I bent down to a cheaper price got some sick ass design that was obviously something I could have sold for twice the amount of money to someone else that would have, so it's like you just, I probably not do as many helmets because my price is here, but I'm going to be proud of every helmet I put out because I know I'm giving them some shit that I'm really proud of doing, Yeah.
And it's, so how, when customers, are they giving you an exact idea? Are they giving you 100% free reign? Or they give you
I'm such an asshole. I'm realizing it more and more every day because when it comes to custom paint, I don't feel like there's anything I can't do. I'm not saying there's anything I can do perfectly. I'm doing what I'm strongest at, right? But can I airbrush a full mural on the helmet and do a scene and do all this? Yes.
Right.
Can I do you a Vegas theme helmet with the logo and the roulette table? And yes. Do I want to? No.
All right.
I don't like theme anything. I don't like theme bikes. I don't like theme helmets. And people might be like, well, Jace, what about your helmet with Samuel Jackson on it and the Pulp Fiction quote? It's not a theme.
Yeah, right.
The paint job on the helmet has dick to do with that. It's just an element on the helmet. So what I've tried to do is I I try to paint things I'm willing to do again in its own new form. So if I did a full airbrush helmet, then and I put it online, then people are gonna be like, hey man, I really like that full airbrush helmet. And now I got 5 of them, and they take so much longer. And with me already kind of not struggling to get the prices I want, but already just content with that, I can't double my price and say, oh, well, if you want one of these type of helmets, this much more. Then in my head, though, this is the problem, though. In my head, fuck, I got paid, $3,000 to paint a helmet.
You got to deliver.
I got to deliver, but now I want $3,000 for every helmet.
Yeah.
And so, like, to me, it's like I'm comfortable with my price, and I'm comfortable with the limit I go towards.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm operating in a nice comfort zone. And at some point I know I'll go above, and I want to offer people a helmet paint job that's less too. But what happens, you know how customers are, they not all of them, I'm not trying to bash customers, but sometimes, you give them an inch and they take a mile. You're like, all right, I'll lower my price and we'll do a dumbed down version of this helmet with no leaf or no major thing. And they're like, hey man, I just think it looks so much better with some skulls on it. And then next thing you know, you're doing the same fucking helmet you would have charged the normal price.
Well, or you got to have a floor, because if you agree to do something too cheap and cut your quality, you wouldn't cut your quality, but maybe you do so simple of a design to get it in a much lower price bracket. You got guys that are looking at it and they're thinking, yeah, it's not the best thing I've ever seen, and the customer isn't telling them, yeah, I wanted to do something for $200, or what I mean. They're not saying all the parameters they put on you. So that is tough too, that you don't want to put anything out that's too beneath what you're capable of, or what you want out. You got to maintain that too. But I always try to do like different, almost structured it kind of like we did at Iron Horse, where we did different levels of, because it also made it easier for dealers who knew nothing about paint at all. It made them easier to explain to a customer, where we had, like an S level, simple, and we had like 4 or 5 designs, and it fit in this category. Then we had a medium category, with a little more extensive graphics or effects or different, customers didn't always understand why it was in a higher price bracket, but it was for the complexity. But we'd have 5 or so different levels, and then especially on the relaunch. But I did before Iron Horse, I kind of tried to do my stuff that way too. And then post, I definitely did, where we had a super high end, where it's everything in the kitchen sink, but you were gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
Where it did have the murals and all that stuff, under candy and all that, but it was ridiculously high. But if somebody wanted to pay for it, I would do it.
Well, see, the way I have it right now is I get that using the tiers basically, but the reason I never liked doing that when I was younger is because I also, like I said before, I want everything I do to be a top
badass,
of it. Like, I don't want to be on this like run of doing these sick ass helmets, and then I come out there with this little basic ass, helmet, and people are like, oh, dude, I thought you were killing it, whatever. But because you can't translate all the reasons why this helmet's not as complicated or whatever through pictures on social media nowadays, and nobody that's getting a $700 helmet is going to be like, oh, well, this is a Fast Life Garage special, and everybody else knows what I normally charge. Right. And so they're thinking that costs, you know what I mean? So it kind of puts you in a bad boat. But the style of helmets I do right now, pretty much as long as I tell them, like, look, when people hit me up, I got two people yesterday, hey, I really want to do a paint job that kind of is similar to my bike. I'm like, well, whoever painted your bike, have them do a similar paint job to your bike. Right. Or they'll have a Harley and they want it, I want it the same color as my Harley. I'm like, man, the Harley colors cost so much money for me to get. It's like, it's not really worth it. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you want to do a custom helmet, let's do a custom helmet, not a custom helmet to match your leather jacket or your fucking Yamaha blue shit. Like, dude, like, you're spending a lot of money. This thing needs to be personalized to you, not a bike. Yeah. And, so I have a range to which I operate in, which the price range I'm willing to go in. So I only put out stuff that is in that range, so that, because some people can sound like they're just bullshitting customers when you start playing the you want that, that's an extra $200. And you want
Right.
yellow pinstripe, that's a doozy. we have to charge more money for yellow. I'm sorry, it's just harder to work with. So I feel like instead of having all these complicated increases, dude, $1,500 is basically what we charge to paint a helmet. And yes, there are versions we can do cheaper, and yes, there are versions we can do more expensive, but I'd rather work within a $300 up or down price range.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Than, that helmet's going to cost you $3,000. That one, we'll do that for $450. Fuck that. I'd rather just operate in this window.
How specific are they getting? Are they sending designs or sketches? Or are you getting
I won't
free
take
reign?
those. I won't take anything like that.
Right on.
And I honestly don't take designs when they send me other people's work.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I've done enough work to where I've developed my own style. And I feel like if they want my work, then they're going to show me my work that they like. If they like my buddy, Lucky from Jeremy from Lucky Strike.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I'll give you his number.
Go to him. Yeah.
Hey, you want a Poland job? I got Poland's number too. I'll tell you right there.
Plenty of those.
So
so-and-so will do it for this price.
No, I don't do that
Call
price
him.
shit either, man. I don't either. I'm sorry.
I got their number if you don't.
I had a dude the other day, man. He hit me up, and he was like this military guy or something. I don't even think he was in the military. I think he might have been in there. But I don't sell a product off the shelf, right? So
right.
I can't be like, all right, man, I'll give you a 20% discount off this. 20% discount off my helmet or my labor is really hard for me to pull off, man.
Yeah.
It really is. I wish I could do something. But he kept like asking, man, do you do military discounts? Man, you want to sponsor this or this, that, all these things. And I was like, man, I'm sorry, dude. You're putting me in a spot where I don't really want to have to tell you no, but I have no other choice. And then I told him it was $1,500, but he thought it was with a helmet. And I told him, I was like, here's the deal. I'll sell you the helmet at dealer cost, which I do for my helmet paint jobs, so that they're not paying full retail for a helmet plus a paint job, just to help out. And he was, I can't. That's too rich for my blood. To buy the helmet on top of it, which was only going to be a couple $100, I was like, sorry, man. Like, it is what it is. I mean, I can't budge.
It's an expensive game.
Yeah, it's like
If you want to play, come on.
I was like, man, I can only do X amount of helmets a month.
Yeah.
And put out the quality and the innovation that I want to put out, and it's mine.
Everybody said, I'm going to do my paint job. Cut me break. I'm going to bring you 10 people or whatever. And
yeah.
I actually, especially dealing with racers and stuff, you always hear that kind of stuff. So I started like putting together a written program. And when somebody would say, I'd have like a flyer, just hand them right away. It's like, okay, well then let's do it this way. You pay full boat on this one, and we're going to track everybody you bring, and you bring me 10 guys. Your next one's on me. Like, it will be 100% free when you bring me 10 guys.
I used to tell them the opposite.
Never had one person follow.
I tell them opposite. I was like, if you got 10 friends, and fucking send 2 of them here to get a paint job, then I'll do yours for free. And never happened.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't really like dealing with all that stuff. And I like the fact now that through social media, we've all got our own styles of helmets and our own styles of paint, even if they're in the similar, even when we're doing panels or whatever. So just like people that search for tattoo companies or clothing companies or, people that cut their hair, it's like people come to us because they want our style, and that's what I'm offering them. I'm not offering, your style to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that, that's now the difference is in like when I came into the game and when you were at Iron Horse, we didn't really have that luxury. We were like, someone comes in with a Mike LaValle flame job. We're like, okay, let me figure out how to do real fire.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But now it's different now. It's just not the same. And I just don't want to I don't want the pressure of meeting someone else's look.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah,
you're setting yourself up for failure too. Because it's also a different set of expectations. And like you said before, just go to the guy who did it.
Yeah, everybody's reachable now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a strange, and as much as things change, they stay the same. And I don't know if maybe it's urban legend, but I always heard a story of Von Dutch having a customer. He was the same way, I guess, where he would do his own deal, and customer came and told him, I want this color and this shape of deal, whatever, all this pinstriping, and customer comes to pick it up and can't see anything on it, and he's like,
thought you said my car was ready. And he said, it is. You told me everything to do except where to put it. I put everything you wanted inside the glove compartment. So he's supposedly like striped all inside the glove compartment just to make a point, you know, like,
Yeah.
you can't tell me what to do. You can't. So it's hard to tame a tiger, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there's that other side of the fence where it's like, you know, you're a customer, you're paying for something. It's like when you go buy a, you know, expensive shirt or a bike, you know, you're buying what you want. You know, you're spending a lot of money, but you know, when you're having someone build you a custom bike, like you don't get as much say as you think.
Right.
You know, like you go to Jesse James or fucking, you know, certain people, like
True.
you're gonna get his version of some of the things that you want.
Absolutely.
And you pick those people because you like what they do. So
right. Sure. Yeah. Yep.
you're pretty much going to be happy with whatever they do because you know it's going to be unique in yours. But if you have to tell them every step of the way, like, oh man, I want that bolt this color, or I have to work with this, it takes away the fun of doing the job, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And you're always going to piss somebody off. You're either going to tell somebody you can't do something they want, or you do what they want and it looks too close to something somebody else has painted, or
you also,
whatever.
When you are, I guess, my asshole this way, you weed out a lot of the personalities that you know you're going to clash with at the beginning of the conversation.
Probably pretty good.
You know, someone that's texting me every night.
Oh my God.
Oh man, hey man, I saw you just posted someone else's helmet. Is mine next? I'm like, dude, I sent, you know, no, it's not.
That was a luxury we had back. I mean, we were missing some things, not having the social media, but that was one thing that was good. It was easy, real easy. And I've heard, like, here lately, Garley, you know, he's got some text response to keep his, you know, working time, which sounds brilliant. But for us back then, when I was running my shop, it was so easy. I mean, you had landlines, and that was it. You leave the shop, you got an answering machine, so it was super easy to get away. But also, they can't, you know, somebody can't get a hold of you, but they get a hold of the guy across the town, you know, and go elsewhere. So I'm sure it cost a little bit too back then, but it's different challenges, I guess.
It's just going to keep evolving and getting more complicated, and like I said, the people that are at least conscious to the changes and evolution of business and marketing and how this all works, you know, if you're just at least conscious with it, you'll be able to adapt and change and survive.
Yeah, and bigger is not always better.
No,
I mean,
dude, happiness comes when you are not overwhelmed.
Low overhead. There's a lot to be said for that, for sure. And that was one of, there were several issues, but that was a big thing with Iron Horse. I mean, besides the industry kind of dying a little bit, but at some point you get so big that it's hard. You know, it's like a cruise ship. You can't turn on a dime any longer, and you got so many more people in the process that don't understand the process of, you know, early on, for instance, you know, production wise, it's all motorcycle people building bikes, and the guys in the warehouse were motorcycle guys that knew the parts and all that. But towards the end, it's so big, you need warehouse specialists, not motorcycle specialists. But then you run into things like, we had a deal, we were at the point of liquidating inventory and stumbled across like pallets of hand controls. It's like, why are these here? And we finally, you know, realized that. So midway through, the DOT changed. Like early on, you could have a sticker that said what, like, brake fluid to use in the hydraulic cylinder. Well, then they changed it because the sticker could come off, and then somebody puts the wrong thing, it eats seals, and then you got a problem. So they decided, okay, now the hydraulic cylinder cover has to be engraved with that information, not a sticker. So from the warehouse side of things, you got to change a part number. So now it's a new part number. So now the guys in the warehouse, all they know is, this is an old part number that we don't use anymore. This is the new part number. Whereas if you knew what you were looking at or knew those parts, I mean, we had CNC machines in-house that we could have engraved them in-house, or had the vendor, for instance, do just the cover, send back all the covers and have those retro fit to work. But when you have people, you know, that don't know, they don't know. So then you end up, you know, we end up with a lot of dollars tied up in a forward control that was completely usable with just a different lid. You know, it's the exact same. So you get a lot of inefficiencies that once you get too big. So bigger is not always better.
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
what I'm
for
saying.
sure.
Just, I think that the best thing is just finding a way to be content with everything you're doing quality wise, and find like the little wins I like better than the big ones. Like, it's easy to grow your shop big. I mean, with the demand that we have, we can simply lower our prices just a little bit and then open the floodgates, and then I can hire a bunch of people, and then you're like, you're worn thin, and like your art suffers, your design suffers, your quality of life suffers, and then it just eventually, like you said earlier, you don't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so now I'm actually getting to a point where I really do enjoy painting again.
Yeah.
And it's because I'm not looking at a wall full of things that I owe my time to. Now I got a couple
so much-
shelves, a bike here, a bike there, a couple helmets, and I'm looking at like, fuck, man, I'm paid for the rest of the year, and I got plenty of time to knock all this out in a comfortable manner without a bunch of customers breathing down my neck and you know, people that are demanding things. And it's just
For sure.
it's a better world to work in, man.
Well, if you can manage your workload, you can do things where you are going to shows or going on rides or whatever,
Yeah.
and you're not. Because that was the other thing, man. Back then, whether it's my shop or Iron Horse or whatever, it was even hard to do vacation. Because even if you were physically gone, you're still thinking about.
Yeah, dude, I ruined my anniversary last year with my wife because I was building my FXR that I rode all over the country last year, and I had just started painting it right before we went on our our anniversary. I was not there the entire time. I was in my head.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Dude, we got back on a Sunday, and I came to the shop and worked on that bike all night.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I've been there. You can't. And I have friends from school, you know, say, "Oh, it must be great having your own business and making your own hours." Like, let me tell you about your own hours. You know, there's 24 of them, 7 days a week. You know, those are your own hours because you can't get away from it. So, and I think if you're that kind of person, or if it's ingrained in you, I mean, even though, like, I did the same thing at Iron Horse, you know, I put in way too many hours that wasn't getting paid for, you know, because that's just, you got pride in it. And if you got pride in your work, you do it regardless. I mean, working for a corporation, like, I may be up at midnight, you know, typing emails and doing whatever else just because, I mean, I've got a give a shitter that's turned on a little bit, you know, and sometimes it is hard to separate, or I tend to treat everything as same as when I was self-employed. So it is still sometimes hard to separate, but when it's bigger, it's even harder, though.
I think it's important that everybody does experience both sides of that fence, though, because it's that old saying which I tried to quote this before and I didn't do a good job. I'm not going to do it again, but you really can't appreciate the simplicity of having a well-oiled machine shop that's very low production but very high quality, as opposed to a high production, high stress, you know. You know, it doesn't, you kind of have to try the other way to realize, okay, and some people might work better under that.
Right.
Like, they might operate their business way better when they're trying to bang out 5 bikes a week. Me, no.
Well, I mean, I think, and he might have even mentioned it on yours, but I think Adam and Garley's, you know, he saw the same thing, you know, at a shop where you got drive-by traffic and you're doing a whole lot of work, but a lot of it's just to pay the bills. Where now you get, you know, smaller shop, lower, you know, a little lower overhead, and you can control your workflow a little bit better and do fewer higher paying jobs. And so then you got some pride into what you're doing. And there's a place for all of it, you know, but
I mean, it's always the same. It's like, you know, you got places like Walmart that's just pumping out shit left and right, and then you got like more higher end places that are kind of doing less stuff but higher quality things, and they close at a time that, you know, like, fuck, man, who closes at 9 o'clock at night? You know, and when you're so used to the Walmart shit where it's 24/7 at your convenience, you know, and
oh, for sure.
But yeah, well, shit, man. You got anything else going on, or?
Man, these days, not really. I mean, it's social media for me is just mostly keeping the flame alive a little bit. I get a lot of people ask questions. You know, most of the stuff that I get hit up on are mostly, you know, the Dimebag, you know, Pantera stuff that we did before, and try to post a little bit here and there on that, but I'm not trying to generate any revenue from any of it, so I'll disappear for long periods of time. But it's mostly just because people do tend to ask or questions, so I just try to stoke that fire a little bit. But no, man, other than like I said, just a few helmets here or there, guitars here and there. It's looking into getting licensed for skydiving, and they're doing helmets. So I see them probably enter the same thing when my kids are racing BMX. You know, you get BMX helmets. So I can see a new maybe a new helmet market evolving a little bit to some degree, maybe. Do a few more of those.
Those got those like
deals.
wingsuit guys that got like badass graphics on their suits, and then like you can do a helmet. Their helmets are more aerodynamic, I think, right?
Yeah. It's quality wise, it's the same as those old, the old skateboard with the ProTech.
Yeah.
You know, it's just plastic and foam for the most part, but now they're covered so that they cover your face just so you can,
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know how well the helmet of a skydiver is going to really do if they actually need it.
Well, actually, where it's really more for, if you clip the door on the way out, you clip your buddy's foot, to the head, when you're doing whatever, it's not necessarily. Yeah, if you're trying to rely on it at impact on the ground. But
I got a helmet. I'm just going to land on my head and see if it works.
Now, these days, man, it's equipment failure or malfunction's pretty rare. It's usually human error these days. So the helmets are kind of more ancillary stuff. You don't get knocked out or knocked unconscious just because you collide with somebody's foot or.
I wonder if it's the same for like in Texas. We're a no helmet law state. So I wonder if you can skydive helmetless.
Yeah. There are people that do, and even tandem guys. You'll see some of them will wear those little old-fashioned stripped helmet deals, but that's more for the guy. The instructor behind them, so you're not taking a head to the mouth.
Yeah.
Kind of a deal, but yeah, people still do it. It's just, I don't know. I guess it's like wakeboarding without a life jacket.
Dude, I had a buddy.
It's not life or death, but
I got a buddy that worked for Arlen Ness and forever for the longest, and then he had like broke his back riding bikes and stuff, and then he recovered. And he was like, man, I need to stop doing all this bike stuff is heavy. And he picked up skydiving.
Yeah.
His name was Brian. He's fucking awesome. Dude, he used to have this company called like High Class, Low Life, T-shirts, all kinds of cool shit. But
yeah,
he was on the TV show with Ness, with Corey Ness and all them, and doing all that stuff. And he's a good dude, but man, it was just crazy because I was like, dude, so you left. He didn't leave bikes, but he kind of chilled out on them.
Right.
But now he's like all like full force into skydiving, like hardcore and shit.
It's there's a lot of different disciplines, and I mean it's a little more involved of a sport than most people think. I mean, there's a lot to the body flight and similar, what people are doing with it's almost like two different disciplines or two different things. Like you've got the free fall aspect where you got guys that are spending time in the wind tunnels and trying to get really good at the flight part of it, or whether it's head down or sitting or whatever, different freestyle type of stuff. And then under canopy is a whole nother aspect to it, and you got guys that are doing high performance, small canopies, doing high speed stuff and trying to swoop down to the ground. And
I think I would be horrible at it because even like when we go to swimming holes and we jump off the big ass rocks, they're like 20 or 30 feet up in the air.
Yeah.
I swing my arms like I'm trying to grab something all the time, and I just feel like if I jumped out of an airplane, I'd just be trying to grab something. You know what I mean?
It's a lot. I've only done a couple of jumps, but enough to get enough of an idea that I know I want to pursue it.
Yeah.
But you don't get that sinking feeling like on a roller coaster because you're not passing. I guess it's because you're not there's no point of reference, so you don't feel like you're falling. And then the like rolling up the windows type of thing, because you hit terminal pretty quick, so you've got the air pushing up against you. So like to move your arms, you have to push
like a push up.
You're almost like in a wall of air, so you got to kind of push. Whereas if you jump from a object, like a cliff or whatever, you don't have that pocket of air pushing up on you, so you do feel that it's a different weightless.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And like height wise, like I'm not great like standing on a roof or anything like that. That's a little gnarly for me. I don't particularly love it, but when you're like in the door, the ground's so far away you don't see detail, so you don't really get that height sensation either. It's by the time you can see detail, and it would be to that point you're well under canopy, hopefully. It's just two different things, so it's different than you would think, because it really does feel more like flying than falling.
That's cool.
Really, yeah, like the Buzz Lightyear.
I don't think I'm gonna try it, but
come on.
Well, shit, man.
It's good.
We're about 2.5 hours in. You got
Right on.
That was pretty cool, man. I'm glad you reached out to me because, like I said, it just brought back a lot of memories from, the Iron Horse days and being on the outside looking in and all that stuff, man.
No, it was cool. I'd listened to some of your other stuff, and it's like, because I know you're younger, a little bit younger, and kind of that next wave of stuff, and it's like, that's pretty interesting or cool that there's a lot of the same challenges, and sitting there listening to it like, I remember that, or that's changed, but it really isn't much different, like that kind of stuff. So no, it was cool, man. I like stuff you're doing, and hopefully it keeps growing, and you got a good niche of people and all that good stuff. So
well, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you coming out here, dude.
No worries.
All right, man. We'll get you
anytime.
What's up, everyone? Hope you guys enjoyed that. Once again, I want to thank Rick for coming out and sharing some of those stories and insights and whatnot. So thank you, sir. Also want to thank our sponsors, D&D Exhaust. Check them out on their new website, www.exhaust.com. You can also catch them on Instagram at D Exhaust. On Instagram, is also on Facebook and Twitter. Check that out. Don't forget, you can also give them a call Monday through Friday Central Time at 844-D&D Pipe. Spell that out on your phone, homie. Also want to thank Texas Performance, TexasPerformanceMC.com, as well as Instagram. Also want to thank Horsepower Inc., HorsepowerInc.net, Horsepower Inc. on Instagram, and Horsepower Inc. Indy on Facebook. And I also want to thank my boy Brian over at Paint Huffer, painthuffer.com, if you want to get some flakes, and Paint Huffer Metal Flake if you just want to check out the awesome Instagram page with everybody's cool work on it. Thank you guys for checking us out again. I want to thank all you for, the Patreon support and just everything. And I appreciate you guys keeping this thing going for us. And also want to say, man, anytime you guys hear about products or, people or shops on this podcast, man, if you ever go reach out to them, man, if you could just name drop me the podcast, at least it helps me out a lot, man. It helps me gain more traction and get more of an audience. And we're noticing that the bigger this podcast gets, the more easier it's becoming to get guests to come on, because I guess most of us listening and to this, we're used to podcasts, so we dig them, right? That's why we listen to them. But, the podcast thing is still a very new medium to a lot of especially the motorcycle industry. So like I said, when people find out that you heard about them or you ordered a product or you did something through a podcast, it helps the whole concept of podcast grow, so it might not just be ours. It might be, one of the other ones you listen to as well. So anyway, I appreciate everything you guys do for us. Appreciate all the feedback, all the love, and I love you guys. Thanks. Peace.